Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the DN WhatIf, with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Deku Had a Twin Sister. All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Summary. Izaria Midoriya has always protected her brother, ever since they were little kids. But what happens when her brother suddenly gets a quirk, and is no need of protecting anymore? Ryoshi Chaisai has always excelled in anything that he tries at. But there is something more at play, and certain family mysteries will reveal the truth. Koguriki Mukitsu has always wanted to put on a show, but he is held back by the pain of his past. So this is basically the My Hero Academia storyline, except that I've added my ox into the mix as well. I came up with these characters with help from my brother and cousin, and I wanted to put it somewhere. Chapter 1. Prologue 1 Not Created Equal. Summary. This is about my ox. Her name is Izaria Midoriya, and she is Izuku's twin sister. She does have a quirk, unlike her brother, and it has been passed down on her maternal side, but skips every other generation and gets more powerful every time. Izaria's grandmother had it, but not her mom. Eventually the quirk doesn't skip a generation and resets, starting from the beginning again. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Why are you being so mean? Izaria's head perked up as she heard the scared voice of her brother. She looked over to him, spotting his dark green hair a couple yards away, and tilted her head. He had his arms spread out defensively. You're making him cry, Kaken. If you keep hurting him, I'll stop you myself. He was standing in front of another boy, who was crying on the ground, hugging his sides. Izaria's brother was about to burst into tears as well, and he was standing in front of a boy with ashy blonde-colored hair. Two other boys were at his sides, one with demon wings, another with a stretchy hand. Her tiny nose scrunched up in distaste. What was Kaken doing? Kaken smirked. HMPH, you want to pretend to be a hero. A fist full of explosions sparkled in his hands. At this point, Izaria had stood and began walking over to the scuffle, wondering what was going on. You don't stand a chance without a quirk, Deku. The boys beside him chuckled cruelly, and Izaria narrowed her eyes. Kaken raised his fist, clearly now going to punch Izaria's brother, and the girl snapped into action. She moved with the speed of a 4-year-old after a chocolate chip cookie, her deep green hair moving with the wind. She shoved herself in between the Izuku and Kaken, gathering water around her as she moved. Stop, she yelled, drenching Kaken and his friends in water. Not a drop splashed on her or her brother. The explosions had fizzled out, leaving the ash-blonde boy soaked with wide eyes. He blinked a couple of times before realizing that Izaria had gotten in his way. Go away, Izaria projected, scowling at the bully that stood before her, not even the slightest bit intimidated by him. All he did was glare and scoff. Okay, maybe a little intimidated. You'll never be a hero if you need your dumb sister to protect you, Deku, Kaken spat. He walked away with his friends, leaving Izaria alone. She let out a breath and relaxed a bit, the water on her palms dripping to the ground. She turned to her brother, who was still very frightened, and put her hands on his shoulders. Izu, please be more careful when it comes to Kaken. He isn't nice anymore. She gave him a sympathetic look in her eyes, and he weakly smiled and helped up the boy he had been protecting. He thanked her over and over again, but she just smiled back. Izaria gave her brother a hug. Tears may have been briefly shed as she pointed out a more fun part of the playground. That's when she started to feel guilty. Her quirk had manifested just recently, but she was mastering it at faster rates than normal, for a 4-year-old at least. But her brothers still hadn't shown up yet. Here's the sad truth. All men are not created equal. This is a fact that my brother and I realized when we were 4. Chapter 2. Prologue 2 Monster of the Mind. Summary. More lore dropping. Notes. This is the second arc. His name is Ryoshi Chaisai. This is my cousin's Ak. He's pretty complex tbh. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. Rikishi Chaisai swung the door to his house open, revealing his wife, Sakito, sitting in the living room. Rikishi, Sakito said. How's he doing? Rikishi asked. His wife, Sakito, sighed, then spoke. He's asleep now miraculously. I know it's been a couple days, but even then, Sakito trailed off, then turned to Rikishi again. The police, have they? No, Rikishi answered. They're still investigating, but it seems like they're turning up empty at every corner. They're no closer to figuring out who it was than yesterday, or even the day it happened. Suddenly, groggy moaning and groaning sounds came from a room at the end of a hallway, followed by the rustle of sheets. Sakito took a shaky breath, then spoke. Are you going to do it? It was eerily quiet, yet the silence was ear-splitting. Ryoshi was getting pulled. Or was he being pushed? Thrown? Was he falling? He was utterly terrified, but why? He heard voices. 3 men, arguing. It was difficult to make out. We were paid. Bring him to. You idiot. Just. North on. Step on it. Shut it you. We gotta. Before heroes. Ryoshi couldn't see anything. He heard a sound. Tires. He felt a strange feeling start building up inside him. Are you going to do it? Rikishi sighed and put his head in his hands. He made a final decision and stood up. Yes, he said. Ryoshi can't have this hanging over him as he grows. I won't allow it. He deserves to have a happy life, just like everyone else. I won't let that be taken away. Rikishi marched down the hallway to Ryoshi's room, where he saw his child breathing erratically, tossing and turning in his bedsheets. He knelt down at his son's bedside, his hands shaking. He took a breath, then laid his hand down on Ryoshi's head. Ryoshi was panicking now. Everything seemed to be shaking, harder and harder as time went on. The hell is back there? Go check it out. Knock. Back out. Need to. Ryoshi heard footsteps come near. He heard someone say something, but he couldn't make it out at all. Suddenly, there was some kind of blast. Rikishi felt his consciousness get drawn into Ryoshi's. He was being pulled, this way and that, before he finally came to a stop. Rikishi opened his eyes and beheld Ryoshi's mindscape. It was in the process of changing, morphing to represent Ryoshi's new most significant memory. Parts of the previous one remained, for now. It gave off feelings of happiness and laughter 1 second, and the next, feelings of terror and hopelessness. These feelings only reaffirmed Rikishi of what he had to do. In the center of the mindscape, there was a large black door. It was swung open, spilling some kind of smoky black substance out into the rest of the mindscape. Beyond the door was the source of the black smoke, that being the memory in full. It's too major a memory, Rikishi observed. I can't erase it, not completely. He trudged toward the door, fighting his way through the smoke and terror. He caught a glimpse of what was behind the smoke, filling him with dread. He quickly turned away and grabbed the doorknob, pulling on it with all his strength. I can't erase it. But maybe I can seal it instead, Rikishi thought. He pulled the door closer, then turned to the other side and pushed on it as hard as he could. He pressed his shoulder to the door, finally managing to stem the flow of the smoke and shut it closed. He stepped back, examining the closed door. That won't hold, not for long, he thought. He raised his hand up, and a small black key materialized in his palm. It matched perfectly with a keyhole in the doorknob. Rikishi gripped the key and stepped back towards the door. Ryoshi was on the ground now. His sight was beginning to return, and he could barely make out rocks and debris scattered near him. He seemed to be in an alleyway. He looked up to the end of the alley and click, click. The key turned in the keyhole, locking the door. Rikishi looked across the mindscape, noticing the black smoke already beginning to ever so slightly recede. Relieved, he dropped the key into his pocket. His job done, He pulled himself out of Ryoshi's mind and back into his body. Chapter 3. Prologue 3. The Best Medicine. Summary. Another Auk. And this guy is my brother's Auk. And I hope you guys like him. Notes. Lori. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. See? I told you guys my quirk was the coolest. Meko, the school bully, stood in front of an admiring crowd of students. A piece of a steel chain orbited around the palm of his hand, morphing into all different kinds of steel sculptures and shapes. The second after he had found the chain link off the broken swing, he had been showing off. The kids in Meko's posse agreed without question and glared at the rest of the students, some of which hurriedly praised Meko's quirk. Others began showing off theirs as well. Ricky spotted one kid walking on the wall, and another blowing huge gusts of air through his mouth. Ricky grinned. This is my chance, he thought. I can finally get back at him for being such a jerk. Ricky stepped closer to his fellow sixth graders. He made sure he had what he needed and spoke up. "Want to see my quirk?" he yelled. Meko stopped and turned to Ricky with a glare. All the other kids quieted down. Meko's favorite victim, Ricky especially, was speaking up. Something was going on. "Why would anyone want to see your useless quirk, Mukitsu?" Meko sneered. Ricky reached into his pocket and pulled something out. "I swiped Dad's old phone before I came to school. I bet I can change it into a zapper. That'll teach Meko," Ricky thought. He shifted the phone in his hand, feeling each and every piece of technology inside the silvery casing. It was in such a boring configuration. It was asking, begging to be changed. Ricky smiled and activated his quirk. The phone proceeded to take itself apart, and soon the parts were hovering above Ricky's hand. "If I wire the capacitors in series with a battery, I can eject their charges straight through the power delivery system. It'll be one nasty shock." The parts in front of him whizzed around his hand, building something new around his finger. When the last of the parts clicked into place, he pointed the machine at Meko, who snickered and leered over Ricky. "What makes you think that you can do anything to stop me, you waste of air? You can never be a hero. Especially with a brother like yours," Meko taunted. Ricky froze. How did he know? "That's what I thought. Maybe you should just follow in his footsteps and be a villain instead," he sneered. "Then again, maybe not. I mean, he was so bad at being a villain, he got himself thrown in prison. Even you could be a better bad guy than him." Ricky growled at Meko, his anger rising higher and higher. In a blind rage, he activated the machine and began swinging a punch at the bully. "You stupid jerk, you're nothing but a..." The machine discharged and Ricky cried out an ear-splitting scream. He crumpled to the ground, his arm spasming from the sudden discharge of electricity. His dark brown, almost black hair shot straight up, reacting to the sudden charge. His arm felt like it was on fire, but the real pain was in his finger, a pain that could only be described as thousands of white-hot needles piercing his skin over and over again. He cried out in agony, but the pain stopped as quickly as it had come. He tried to open his eyes, but they wouldn't work for some reason. He heard a large blast go off somewhere in front of him, his ears ringing in response to the unpleasant noise. What was left of the phone lay smoldering on the ground, not unlike Ricky's left arm. He tried to get up, but his body wouldn't listen to him. "I can't move." That was all that his overwhelmed brain could think before he went into shock and passed out. "What happened to him?" a nurse asked, glancing worriedly at her patient. A young boy around the age of 12, with his entire left arm heavily bandaged. And Roman 4 went into his other arm, supplying him with fluids while he slept. He had been unconscious for 8 hours now. Judging by the footage the school showed me, he was being bullied and tried to use his quirk to retaliate. "Obviously, something went wrong," the doctor said. The nurse inspected the identification label taped on the foot of the bed. Name: Koguriki Mukitsu. Date of birth: June 21st, 2170. Quirk: Technopath. Mukitsu, as in, the nurse started. The doctor turned away from some test results and glanced at the boy. That's right. He's brothers with the former villain, Shoseki Mukitsu, the doctor clarified. Format, the nurse gasped. Right, the doctor said. The report I got from the school said that this was the very subject of the bully's taunting. Shoseki Mukitsu was a bit of a polarizing subject in this smaller town. Some people thought he should be rewarded for stopping several criminals in their tracks. Others thought he should stay in prison for the rest of his life for robbery and using his quirk on unsuspecting civilians. What about his quirk? The nurse asked, wanting to change the subject. What is technopath? It's a combination of his parents' quirks. I spoke with them soon after the boy was sent here. His father can lift inanimate objects, weighing up to 150 pounds with his mind, using his telekinesis quirk. He can lift heavier things, but the added strain causes migraines. His mother's brain acts like a CPU thanks to her antenna quirk. She can control any machine she touches, and can interface with computers and smart devices wirelessly through the radio frequency she emits from an antenna that grows at the top of her spine. She also understands and can speak fluent binary code. Both of these quirks mix in a rather interesting fashion. Young Mukitsu can move technology with his mind, and he can control machines by touch like his mother. He also inherited her spinal antenna, the doctor explained. So, a basic combination of his parents' quirks? The nurse summed up. That's where it gets interesting, the doctor said, adjusting Ricky's room in 4. When I attached the heart monitor pads to his chest, I immediately started getting readings. How is that interesting? That's how a heart monitor works after all, the nurse said. It wasn't plugged in. The nurse's eyes widened as she looked over at the boy. His body generates electricity, and a lot of it. Now, electricity in humans is nothing new, of course. In fact, our hearts generate electricity to keep themselves beating using the sinoatrial node, and the brain uses electrical signals to move our muscles. But this electricity is barely measurable, and not enough to power more than our bodies themselves. In Mukitsu, however, both his sinoatrial node and the rest of his body generate a considerable excess of electricity for some reason. He can't discharge it manually, but apparently he can use it to power things, and the faster his heart beats, the more power he generates. My theory is that a standalone quirk factor mutated in his genome and mixed with his parents' factors, creating the gene for technopath, the doctor said. That is interesting, but how did he get hurt so badly? He has third-degree burns on his finger and major nerve damage throughout his left hand. What caused this? The nurse asked. The school told me that Mukitsu used his quirk to make something out of an old cell phone. Based on the footage, it was probably meant to give the bully a small shock, just something to get him off Mukitsu's back. But it backfired because his skin wasn't insulated, and the electricity jumped to the nearest conductive surface, which was his finger. From there, the battery was damaged, and it began leaking acid and rapidly losing charge. The problem is, the electricity in his body kept feeding into the battery, and when it finally exploded, the power rushed back into his body all at once, straight through his finger. That shock caused the nerve damage and the muscle lock-up. The acid from the battery was not only corrosive, but it was also superheated by the electricity. That caused the burns, the doctor theorized. So how do we treat him? Nerve damage takes years to heal, and his hand will never be the same, the nurse worried. I've called for Recovery Girl to come heal him once he wakes up, which should happen soon now that he's stabilized. Although some parts on his hand may go permanently numb, he should be able to use it just fine once he gets used to the feeling. The burns will heal too, but there's no doubt they'll leave scars, the doctor said. The nurse agreed and went to check Ricky's vitals. A few hours later, Ricky woke up, and after being healed by Recovery Girl, was discharged from the hospital. On the drive home, Ricky didn't say much. Mako's words still rang in his head. Worst of all, he was right. His brother was a villain. He had hurt a lot of people, and the rest of the family didn't ever bring him up. It was a huge soft spot for all of them. It was a point that Meko loved to emphasize whenever he decided that Ricky was feeling too good about himself. And the recent incident didn't help in the slightest. Ricky wasn't heroic. A real hero would have walked away in the face of bullying. Instead, he had attacked Meko, just like a villain would. Was that his destiny? Would anyone let him be a hero? Maybe he should just accept it. Ricky, look! His mom called from the driver's seat, trying to cheer Ricky up. A hero. Nearly out of instinct, Ricky's eyes shot open, and he stared out the window. Walking out of an alleyway with two criminals in tow was a heroine with teal-green hair and an orange bandana. The tied-up criminals were beside themselves with laughter, so much so that they could barely move. The heroine smiled and waved at the cheering citizens before handing over the cackling criminals to the police. Almost at once, Ricky's negative thoughts were dispelled as he found himself giggling as well. "That's Miss Joke," Ricky exclaimed. "She's so cool. And funny too, don't you think?" his mom added. "Yeah," Ricky laughed. "I don't care what Meko says," Ricky decided. "I'm gonna be an amazing hero, one that makes people laugh and cheer. That'll show him." Chapter 4. Origin. Summary. First official chapter. Whoop whoop. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. "That's one huge supervillain. Izaria's brother Izuku exclaimed with bright, wide eyes. He grabbed her hand, and they managed to get to the front of the crowd. There was chatter all around them, some on the phone, others to people around them. The villain Izuku had spotted was a giant shark man, who Izaria thought had gone big just to get attention. "Ah, this is going to be good," he said, looking around for a hero. Izaria saw an old man smile at them, and she smiled back, then trying to help her brother see what hero was present. "You have used your skills for illegal purposes when people are going to work, and you have committed a theft resulting in injury," a voice said from a building. The twins turned to see one of their favorite heroes perched on the edge of a roof. "You're a really evil incarnate." "That's Kamui Wood," Izuku exclaimed, stars in his eyes. "He's a young talent experiencing a surge of popularity." The old man beside them chuckled and turned his attention to the teens. "One look at that goofy grin, and I can tell exactly what you are," the old man said. "You're a fanboy." Izaria snorted and covered her mouth, and Izuku responded by lightly elbowing her in the stomach. A little bit," he said. "This is your punishment," Kamui Wood stated, his arm growing into long branches, creating a crackling noise. "Show us some big moves, woodsman," someone shouted from the crowd. Izaria flinched when they shouted in her ear. Izuku let out an almost fangirl squeal, and his twin joined him in saying, "Ah, here it is, the famous, absolute preemptive confinement, lacquered chains prison." The branches quickly made their way around the gigantic shark man, ready to imprison the villain. "Canyon Cannon," another voice shouted from the side. A literal giant of a woman, about the same size as the villain, with blonde hair and a skin-tight suit, kicked him in the face as hard as she could, using her momentum to bring him down. Izaria turned to see her brother with a jaw-dropped expression, and she couldn't help but snicker. It's not like she wasn't surprised she was, but her brother sometimes had the funniest faces. "I just started today," the giant woman said, bending over to take care of the villain. "I'm called Mount Lady. Pleased to make your acquaintance," she said cheerfully. Izaria turned to see a few reporters, but mostly normal guys taking pictures of her. She scrunched up her nose and raised an eyebrow. Izaria turned her head to see Kamui Wood hunched over, looking glum. It was supposed to be his villain to catch, but not today apparently. Poor guy. Her brother had taken out a notebook and began taking notes on the new hero, mumbling to himself, while the older man who had been talking to them earlier said something that made Izuku reply with enthusiasm. "Yes, I will do my best." Izaria smiled to herself while she looked at her brother. She wanted to be a pro-hero too, but only with Izuku on her side. Together they could be a duo, and they would be twice as strong. That was why she didn't use her quirk whenever she felt like it. To her, it felt better to only use it when necessary, like when she defended her brother 10 years ago, or when Izuku wasn't in their room and she practiced by herself. It wasn't fair that one of them got a quirk and the other didn't. But her brother had been wanting to be a hero all his life, and what could Azaria do to stop him? He would be the best hero without a quirk there would ever be, and Azaria would make sure of it, because she didn't want to see him suffer more than he already has. Quickly and efficiently, his pencil glided down the final page of the mid-year exam. The test was a little more challenging than the others, but that wasn't saying much, at least to him. He circled the final answer on the page, turned the test over, and signed his name on the front. Ryoshi Chaisai, the name read. Ryoshi stood from his desk, test in hand. He walked up to the front of the classroom, the teacher eyeing him suspiciously. Done, Ryoshi said, setting his test on the teacher's desk. The teacher merely raised his eyebrow. Done, sir, Ryoshi corrected. 10 minutes, Mr. Chaisai? The teacher said. I'll be the judge of that. He grabbed Ryoshi's test and began flipping through it, checking first that all the work was shown. He stopped halfway down the second page. Chaisai, he said. Sir? Ryoshi responded. The teacher turned the test so Ryoshi could see. He pointed to question 14, where none of the printed answers were circled. Care to explain? The teacher asked. I finished the equation, but none of the answers on that question were correct, Ryoshi explained. So I wrote in the answer and circled it. He pointed to the bottom of the question, where his answer was circled. The teacher turned the test over, examining Ryoshi's work. He considered the question for a moment, then stood from his seat. Class, your attention please, he said. You may ignore question 14, as it contains an error. Please continue. He turned Ryoshi's test over and wrote in his grade, handing it back to Ryoshi. 1450, it said. 98%. Well done, Mr. Chaisai. But look here, the teacher said, pointing to one of the final 3 questions, gesturing to the mess of written work. You overthought this question severely. The answer was A, and you circled D because you treated it as a quadratic instead of a normal equation. You attempted to solve for missing variables that did not exist, and thus answered incorrectly. Ryoshi prickled a bit at the criticism, but at the same time understood that his teacher was right. Noted. I have a meeting with the counselor soon, he said. Can I go? Yes, you're excused, the teacher said without looking up. Have a nice day. Ricky's eyes flew back and forth across his computer screen, reading up on the latest industrial laser technology, the sounds of his classroom registering as little more than background noise. The device utilizes a low-power laser emitter, and the beam is then focused through a series of amplifier lenses. This increases the focus and density of the laser, and the result is a high-efficiency light beam capable of burning through many different kinds of substances. The beam's effect is modular and can be changed depending on the emitter. The red emitter has the aforementioned heat effect, and the green emitter fires an energy bolt that stuns targets for a short time. This technology is extremely experimental, and it will be a while before it comes to the consumer market. The article ended and Ricky leaned back in his seat, considering the implications of using such a laser for hero work. I wouldn't need to use the red emitter for combat, although it would be useful in an emergency, Ricky thought. Doesn't matter if it's experimental. With the patent right here, I could probably fashion one myself. The stun bolt sounds the most useful for fighting given that it's non-lethal. I wonder if I could do one the red meter is Mukitsu. Ricky jumped in surprise and looked up to see who had called his name. His teacher scowled down at him, and the rest of the students had turned in his direction. One of the students, Ijiro Kirishima, was giving him a thumbs up, but the rest of them were snickering and whispering to each other. Ricky looked back up at the teacher. Mukitsu, if you won't stop muttering in code, can you at least quiet down? Some of the students are trying to learn, the teacher scolded. Ricky gave a quick apology, and the class got back to the lesson. Son of a kilobyte. He hadn't realized he was thinking out loud. He closed his laptop and tried to listen to the rest of the lecture, but his mind began wandering again. He glanced down at his scarred left hand, remembering the day he had not only made a fool of himself, but also how he seriously injured his hand. Ricky had done a great deal of studying since the incident, and he could have been one of the top students in his school. But half the time he was studying varying types of technology to use with his quirk. He had found that the better he understood how any given device worked, the easier it was to not only make it himself, but to adapt it so it could be used with his quirk. He had also been studying the strategies of pro heroes, and how they used their quirks to get a better idea of what kind of hero he could be. Suo, as third-year students, it's time to think about your futures and what you want to do with your lives, the twins' teacher said, slamming a piece of paper on his desk. Izaria slumped lower in her seat. This was one of the things she didn't enjoy talking about. Izuku did, and he would spout random facts about UA all day long. But Izaria just wanted to be with her brother, and it didn't really matter which school she went to. She turned her head to see her green-haired twin, writing in one of his notebooks again, his head down. I could pass out your career aptitude test, but why bother? We all know you all want to go to the hero track. The class erupted in cheers, every person showing off their quirk, all except Izuku and Izaria. Her brother seemed to shrink in his seat, and she frowned at the sight. Yes, you got some very impressive quirks, but no power usage allowed in school. Get a hold of yourselves. Hey Teach, don't let me in with these bunch of losers. I'm the real deal, but these guys will be lucky to be a sidekick to some busted D-lister. Ha! A loud voice said, full of disbelief and confidence. Azaria rolled her green eyes at the sound of his voice, and her scowl deepened. I don't want to make buddy-buddy with those who have a weak quirk, you know. You think you're better than us, Katsuki? A voice yelled from the back. Let's go. I'll take you all on. Huh. You've got an impressive test result. Maybe you will get into UA. Hi. The teacher said, looking at the paper in front of him. Izuku buried his head in his arms, not looking at anyone, and Azaria looked over in concern. He's gonna try for the national school? The school has a 2% acceptance rate. It's impossible to get into. That's exactly why it's the only place worthy of me. I ace all the mock tests. I'm the only one at this school who stands a chance of getting in. Bakugo hopped on his desk for dramatic effect and smirked. I'll end up more popular than All Might himself and be the greatest hero of all time. The people all across the world will know who I am, and it all starts with UA. Hi. Azaria sighed and rolled her eyes again. Way to ramble. Oh, the teacher said, looking at his paper again. Now that we talk about it, it's true that the Midoriya twins also wish to attend UA. Azaria facepalmed and Izuku shrank lower in his arms. The rest of the class turned to the back of the room where the twins were sitting, stared a second, and then burst out laughing. Really, Izuku? You're kidding, right? There is no way you're getting into the hero course without a quirk. Azaria winced as her classmates bashed on her brother. She was about to speak up on his behalf, but he did before she could. Izuku shot up from his desk, his dark green eyes wide. Actually, they got rid of that rule. I can be the first one. It's not impossible, Azaria exclaimed, though her voice was drowned out by everyone else. She grunted and pushed the kids who were getting too close to her desk. Bakugo shot over to Izuku's desk and punched a fiery fist to it, making the green-haired boy get thrown back. He had done it too fast for Azaria to react, but she was on her feet now. Listen up, Deku. You're even worse than these rejects, you quirkless wannabe. You really think they'll let someone like you in when they can have me? Azaria stood up and the class went silent, but Bakugo was too oblivious to notice. Huh? No way, you got it all wrong, really. Izuku scooted back towards the wall, waving his hands in surrender. You gotta believe me. It's just that I wanted to be a hero since I was little. I may not have a quirk, but I can still try my hardest, can't I? He looked so helpless, and that was when Azaria decided it was enough. Bakugo exploded. You'll never be able to hang with the best of the best, you'll... Stop it. Azaria's quiet voice pierced the loudness, causing everyone to freeze. She helped her brother off the floor, who clung to her, now standing behind her. She turned to Bakugo and glared. You need to chill out. And stop calling him Deku. That's not his name. You of all people should know that. No one in the class moved. Everyone knew that Azaria had a very powerful quirk, even on par with Bakugo's, though she tended not to use it if it wasn't necessary. The ability to manipulate all water around her, and even the water in the air, was powerful enough. The ash-colored haired boy growled. You really love interrupting, don't you? Azaria's mind flashed with events that would lead to her brother getting hurt by Bakugo, all of which she intervened and stopped. Well, all of them are incidents in which you make yourself look like an idiot, so I think I'm doing you a favor. Azaria's sass shot back, standing more in front of Izuku. Her matching green hair and green eyes egged Bakugo on. Besides, I wouldn't call stopping you from turning my brother to ash interrupting. Maybe that's why you like this class so much, because the teacher doesn't stop you from making a fool of yourself. You little. Enough, everyone sit down, the teacher ordered. Now, he added when neither Bakugo or Azaria moved. You say you aced all the mock tests. Well, so did I. You say that you'll surpass All Might one day, but who says that it won't be me? And you say that you are the only one getting into UA, but there are 2 more of us, standing right in front of you. Azaria leaned in closer and narrowed her eyes. It seems like you have some competition. And I'll tell you now, my brother and I won't lose. So I hope that you'll remember this when you see our names for the number 1 heroes. Midoriya, sit down. Having finished his test, Ryoshi stood in front of a door. waiting for the counselor to call him in. There was a plaque on the wall that read, "Miss Suzuki." "Come in, Chaisai," Miss Suzuki said. Ryoshi opened the door and stepped in. It was a mid-sized office, with Miss Suzuki's desk at the front with a second chair in front of it. Miss Suzuki sat at her desk and smiled. An older man stood beside her, clad in a newly cleaned and pressed suit. "Chaisai, this is Mr. Takahashi," Miss Suzuki said. "He's here to talk to you about your options after you finish here." Ryoshi raised an eyebrow. "Options? But It's great to finally meet you, Mr. Chaisai," the man interrupted, extending his arm for a handshake, which Ryoshi hesitantly took. "I represent the University of Tokyo," he said, "and I must say, your performance here is quite impressive for your grade level." "Thanks, I guess," Ryoshi said, suspicious. "What's this about?" Mr. Takahashi chuckled. "Right to the point, eh? I think I like you already. The University of Tokyo is very interested in your talents, and we'd like to offer you a place in the upcoming freshman class." Mr. Dayan Takahashi might have expected Ryoshi to show some form of surprise or excitement, but that wasn't the case. He kept his usual neutral expression, much to Mr. Takahashi's chagrin. "My talents?" Ryoshi asked. "You mean my quirk?" "Not quite," Mr. Takahashi said. "Truth be told, I have no clue what your quirk is. Our interests lie more in your intellectual pursuits." Ryoshi narrowed his eyes, considering what this meant. They're offering him a spot. Now, that would mean I would skip high school, Ryoshi asked. "Naturally," Mr. Takahashi answered. "With your potential, I suspect you may not even need a full freshman year at our university. In fact, No," Ryoshi said flatly. Mr. Takahashi was taken aback, but quickly recovered. "Apologies," Mr. Takahashi said dryly. "I may not have heard you correctly. Was that—" "No," Ryoshi repeated firmly. "I'm not going. I'm not skipping high school." "Or what?" Mr. Takahashi sputtered. Clearly, he wasn't expecting such a hard refusal. "Sorry, Mr. Takahashi, but—" Ryoshi reached into his pocket and produced a folded piece of paper. He unfurled it and placed it on Miss Suzuki's desk. "UA, high school course request form. Must be completed at least 2 months prior to entrance exams. First choice, hero course. Second choice, hero course. Third choice, hero course. I'm using my skills to become a hero, not to go to some stuffy university," Ryoshi said defiantly. Mr. Takahashi chuckled dryly, trying to maintain his composure. "But you carry such potential. Something tells me it would be wasted in the hero course." "You're wrong," Ryoshi said. "Think of this. With how fast I can figure things out, and how accurate I am, I could make plans, predict battles and outcomes, work out positions, and make strategies." As Ryoshi explained all the different ways he could use his intelligence in hero situations, he found himself grinning. This was something he was truly passionate about. "So please," Ryoshi finished, turning to Miss Suzuki, "could you send that to UA? I'm shooting my shot, and I don't intend to miss." Ricky's thinking was interrupted by the bell marking the end of the day. He stood and started packing up, realizing he was the last one out. Mainly because the other students had packed up in advance, while Ricky was lost in thought. He finished packing and made his way out the door, where he found Kirishima waiting there. Kirishima grinned, showing off his pointed teeth. "Studying your quirk again, huh?" Kirishima asked, referring to Ricky's binary rambling. "Heh, yeah," Ricky answered. Kirishima was one of the only kids that actually talked to him. Probably because Ricky didn't go out of his way to talk to people. Too stressful. "What was it this time?" Kirishima asked. "I was reading about a modular laser," Ricky responded enthusiastically. He loved talking about technology and became excited when anyone asked about it. "It's still experimental, but I think I can use my quirk to make it into an awesome arm cannon." "Hey," That sounds pretty cool, Kirishima said. Oh, speaking of quirks, I turned in my UA application today, Kirishima added excitedly. Nice. I turned in mine a few weeks ago. Maybe we'll both get in, Ricky responded. The two walked along the hallways until they reached the pickup area where all the buses were. Hey, wanna hang out tonight? Kirishima asked. I just got that new MetaHolo game, we can play it. Can't tonight, Ricky said. Gotta catch up on today's assignment. I spent the whole day researching tech. Oh, okay. Are you going on the bus today? Kirishima asked. Ricky looked around, noticing a clear blue sky and the near-perfect temperature. It was a beautiful day out. Nah, I think I'll take the long way today. It's a nice day out, you know, Ricky said. All right then, see you tomorrow, Kirishima called as he got on the bus. Ricky waved back at him and started his walk home. The last bell rang and Azaria stretched backwards, her back arched and her arms behind her. She let out a satisfied grunt when she heard a couple bones of her spine pop. She watched some kids walk out of the classroom, making plans for the rest of the day. Hey Arya, the fight from this morning is on today's news, Izuku said, pulling out his notebook. I better write down some notes before I forget anything. Maybe I could help you, Azaria offered, leaning over to check his notes. I don't know what you think you're doing, Deku, but we're not done, a harsh voice said, grabbing Izuku's notebook. What'd you get? His diary? Some random kid asked by Bakugo's side. Oh, Izuku tried. Give it back, Bakugo, Azaria commanded. Huh? Don't tell me you're taking notes on how to be a hero, another kid said. That's so pathetic. The first kid commented. Haha, he's delusional. Shut it before I do it for you. Azaria turned her glare at them, and they paled under her stare. Even they knew not to push her buttons. Real funny, guys. Just give it back. Izuku tried to reach for his notebook, but Bakugo exploded it with his hands. He glared at Azaria's brother in the eyes before throwing the book out the window. That's so mean. Okay, that's it, Azaria said, standing, ignoring her brother's silent pleads with his eyes. I'm sick of you, and I demand you leave us alone for once in your life. She pointed a finger at Bakugo's chest and gave him a look of defiance. You have pretty big confidence for someone who doesn't even use their quirk, he sneered, hitting one of the biggest nerves Azaria had. You're probably quirkless like your nerd brother. Her eyebrow twitched, and she clenched her jaw. You think I'm quirkless? Okay, Kakin. Let's go. Outside. Right now. But if I win, you have to tone it down, because I can't stand looking at your face. You're on. But if I win, you can't interfere with the beating that Deku deserves. Bakugo countered, swatting her hand away. Good thing you won't win. You. Come here. Azaria spoke to a random girl who was standing outside the school. She walked over to her with a confused look and asked why she was needed. We need you to watch our match, to make sure no one is cheating, Bakugo said, coming up from behind Azaria. The girl paled at the sight of the hot head and nodded nervously. Oh, okay, I can do that, she stuttered, her blonde pigtails bobbing with her head as she talked. The two enemies found a place outside of the school ground, in the giant field by the park, and already a crowd of kids had appeared. Azaria had already told Izuku to go home, but not because she was afraid to lose, but in case they used him as blackmail or collateral. The green-haired girl wasn't even sure if her brother wanted to see the match in the first place. He had been rambling about All Might when he left the school. Ready to lose? The ash-colored haired boy asked with a smirk that made Azaria want to throw up. He had always gotten on her nerves, even when they were kids, but he had gotten ever worse as he grew. As if. All right, everyone, the girl with the blonde pigtails said, silencing everyone. Are you guys ready? She asked, looking at Azaria and Bakugo. When they both nodded, she continued. Okay then, ready, go. Bakugo practically exploded in fire and shot bursts of it at the opposing girl. She dodged out of the way easily and narrowed her eyes. Explosion after explosion almost singed her hair, and each time Azaria weaved and danced out of the way like water itself. When there was a break so small that there was an audible gasp from the group around them, she was able to break through his flames. Azaria flew into action by calling to the water around in the air. A mist began to form around everyone, making the air moist and cold. She hid within the mist and smiled when she saw a single source of light, small explosions outlining a hand, signaling where Bakugo was. Azaria willed the mist in the air to cool enough to make chills appear on another's arms. The fireworks slowly began to diminish, and Bakugo threw a couple of explosions to try and hit Azaria, but missed greatly each time. She quickly moved around, pulling the droplets of water from the blades of grass as she went, occasionally laughing when the fire boy missed again. "I thought you were going to win," she taunted, and then dodged a blast of heat caused by Bakugo's irrational anger. She gave a quick shove of water in his direction and moved out of the way. A grunt made Azaria smile when she knew that she had hit him. Suddenly, heat began to melt away at the coldness that Azaria hid behind, and Bakugo got a clear view of her, slightly surrounded in water. He leaped at her, aiming to throw the first punch with a right hook. But knowing him, and remembering the countless hours she spent helping her brother make notes on him, Azaria knew exactly what to do. The green-haired girl read his movements and flipped him over her shoulder, knocking the wind out of Bakugo as he hit the ground. Then she felt water calling out to her, begging her to give attention to the droplets. She quickly looked around and drew the water from the grass and nearby flowers, making a liquid prison around Bakugo's arms and legs. Then Azaria froze the water that covered him, making him unable to move. "I win," she smirked, watching him growl in frustration. "She has you pinned," the girl said. "If you can't get out of that, then Azaria is the winner." Some of the crowd cheered, while some of them booed. But Azaria couldn't care less. The green-haired girl walked over to a glaring Bakugo and willed the ice to melt, setting the hot head free. She felt her fingertips and toes beginning to lose warmth, and she knew she had to get out of there. "Now you leave Izuku alone. And if you don't, I hope you remember this day, and know that I wasn't even trying." Ricky took his phone out of his pocket and began absent-mindedly taking it apart and putting it back together with his mind. He extended his spinal antenna about halfway up his neck and started sifting through the various radio stations he was picking up. He could pick up their signals with his antenna and either play the songs to himself in his mind or broadcast them to other wireless devices. Not particularly useful, but convenient nonetheless. He found his favorite station, Put Your Hands Up radio, and kept walking toward his home. He closed his eyes and interfaced with his phone, activating the GPS. His phone would transmit directions directly into his brain, allowing him to literally walk home with his eyes closed. There wasn't much reason for this, other than practice. Ricky had already mastered this, however, so the real reason was likely just because he could. He began singing softly to the song he had tuned in to out of habit. Ricky didn't like singing around other people. He only ever did it when he was by himself. Although the few times he had sung around others, it had been his family, and they had said he had a beautiful voice. "It's such a weird talent for me to have, especially when it has nothing to do with my quirk. Most people would probably think it's weird. Plus, it's just another thing for me to be judged on. I guess it, whoa." His thoughts were interrupted when he accidentally bumped into someone. In hindsight, it was probably a bad idea for him to close his eyes while walking. He tuned out the song and opened his eyes, realizing he was in the middle of a large crowd of people. He turned to who he had bumped into, a green-haired girl about his age. He started to apologize, but she hadn't seemed to notice he was even there. Instead, she was frozen, staring at something further ahead. He followed her gaze and immediately realized why she had frozen. In the middle of the road, Ricky saw what looked like a giant mass of sludge flowing around itself. In the middle of it, was that a person? Ricky couldn't get a very good look at him, but he looked like a middle schooler. with spiky blonde hair that seemed to stand on end. Sludge had covered his mouth and nose, and only the top half of his head was visible. Two bulging eyes were visible above the kid's head, along with a mouth below it, twisted into a wide, unsettling smile. The kid's eyes were full of fear and anger, and small bursts of fire were coming out from where Ricky assumed the kid's hands were. Ricky heard a muffled scream from the kid, and realized with a ghastly feeling that he had to be suffocating. "I have to do something. I have to." A scrawny green-haired boy pushed him out of the way and charged the sludge villain. The girl he had bumped into before ran after him. "Are you insane?" Ricky called after them. Of course, they ignored him, and the boy threw his backpack at the villain, and the sludge retracted for a moment. The trapped kid gasped for air and began yelling at the two, although Ricky couldn't hear what they said. The green-haired boy began a frantic attempt to scrape the sludge away from the spiky-haired kid's mouth. Ricky saw the girl stand in front of the sludge monster with a terrified, yet confident, look on her face and stretched her hands out, most likely to activate her quirk. Sure enough, as soon as she put up her hands, the sludge started to slow down, and the boy managed to scrape away more of the sickly green substance from the spiky-haired kid's face. The girl turned back to the heroes at the front of the crowd with a desperate expression. "Help us," she screamed at them. Suddenly, Ricky's antenna shot straight up. "This is completely insane," he thought frantically, as his phone disassembled itself and swirled around his hand in different parts. "What am I doing? What am I doing? This is crazy. What am I doing?" he thought. Nonetheless, he pushed forward and to the right, making his way through the crowd of people. He wrapped his rubber phone case around his scarred finger, having learned from his past mistake. All the capacitors that had once been all over the phone now assembled on the main board. He screwed it into the rubber around his finger, locking it tightly in place. At the very tip of the board was a piece of metal ending in a point, not unlike the shocking device he had made against Meko all those years ago. Finally, he reached the sidewalk and made a mad dash towards the sludge villain's right side, his arm out ready to zap it. As he came up to the conflict, he saw another boy about his age jumping from an awning, getting ready to fight. Ricky lunged forward, sent power to his arm, and whoosh, suddenly, a blast of wind blew from behind Ricky, throwing him back nearly 10 feet. He steadied himself and looked back towards the trouble. There was a giant of a man standing in front of the sludge villain, Ricky guessed over 7 feet tall. His golden hair was done in 2 large tufts on either side of his forehead, sticking up at least 6 inches. His most defining feature of all was his proud grin, a smile that seemed to tell you that everything would be all right. "All might," Ricky gasped, while the citizens around him gave similar reactions of happiness or hope. The sludge villain reared back in anger. All Might said a few things to the scrawny kid, but Ricky couldn't hear what. "Damn you, All Might," the villain yelled. All Might grabbed the spiky-haired kid's arm and pulled his other arm back, preparing for a punch as his grin grew wider. Detroit smash. Ryoshi watched as the bus that he should have been on drove off into the distance. What a pain, Ryoshi thought. He would have made it in time if Mr. Takahashi hadn't intercepted him in the hallway and begged him to reconsider. The only reason he stopped bothering Ryoshi was because Miss Suzuki threatened to call security. Something told Ryoshi that Mr. Takahashi wouldn't be back at the school anytime soon. He had only told him what he said before, that his decision stood. This was something he had been thinking about for a long time, and it wouldn't be changed by some random college administration with an agenda. It would have been a satisfying moment, and indeed it was, until Ryoshi realized that he missed the bus. But even though his house was a fair distance away, he could easily take the train. Not to mention, it was a nice day out. With a sigh, Ryoshi hopped onto the sidewalk and began the walk into the inner city, where the train station was. It would take him at least 20 minutes to get to the train station, but that was with the main road. If he tried another way, he made a left turn down a smaller street. 19 minutes, he thought. He kept down that street for a little bit, before making a right turn onto another street to shave more time. Down to 16 minutes. He made a quick decision to change streets to avoid waiting at a traffic light. 14 minutes. With lucky timing, another traffic light ahead of him turned, and he was able to safely cross, avoiding an entire block. 10 minutes. He kept walking, eventually coming to an alleyway. Turning down here would shave 2 minutes, he realized. He began to turn, but stopped. The alleyway was completely empty, but something about it seemed familiar. Almost foreboding. He could have sworn he'd seen it before. For reasons he couldn't entirely explain, he turned back around, electing to not take the alley. 12 minutes. He came to an intersection, but it wasn't lit in his direction. Not wanting to wait until he could cross, he turned the corner to avoid it. Continuing down the street, he noticed that traffic had begun to slow down a bit. Strange. He kept walking nonetheless and turned another corner. 7 min oof. He had bumped into someone standing in the middle of the sidewalk. A boy around his age with dark green hair and a scrawny build. He brushed himself off and went to apologize, but then stopped. What the heck is that? In the center of the street, about 20 feet in front of him, there was a giant mass of sickly green sludge with 2 bulging eyes swirling around something. It writhed and twitched apart, revealing a set of large, unsettling teeth wrapped around the mouth of a boy his age. The boy was blonde, with his hair done in a spiked-up mess. His red eyes were contorted in an expression of both fear and rage. He was obviously being held hostage by this sludge monster, but that didn't mean he wasn't fighting back, or at least trying to. Little flaming sparks shot out of where Ryoshi could only assume the boy's hands were, from under the sludge. Suddenly, the boy he had bumped into raced through the crowd and into the scene, to the surprise of the pro heroes trying to contain the situation. He hurled his backpack at the villain and hit him right in the eye, causing the villain to briefly withdraw from the trapped boy, giving him a chance to breathe. Someone else ran out into the action, this time a green-haired girl. She spread her arms out, causing the sludge's movements to slow down. Automatically, Ryoshi's brain fired into motion. In a snap, he looked over the environment. The building to the left has an awning that could support my weight, which leads to another awning within jumping distance, Ryoshi thought. I could get up to the first awning thanks to those stacked boxes there, then jump to the second one. From there, I can make a diagonal leap towards the situation, then hopefully use my quirk to help. Setting his plan in motion, he quickly climbed up the boxes and onto the awning, which, as he thought, supported his weight. He stepped back a bit, then jumped to the next awning stealthily so the heroes, who were standing there waiting, wouldn't try to stop him. Suddenly, another boy about his age ran from the right side of the street towards the sludge villain, prompting the heroes to yell at him to come back. That distraction gave Ryoshi more time to position himself, and now he was ready. All right, Ryoshi, he thought to himself. Time to see if this will really work. He backed up a few paces, then got a running start and leapt off the awning, straight at the sludge villain. He drew his arms back and flexed his fingers, getting ready to use his power. He zeroed in on his target, took a deep breath, and whoosh, a giant gust of wind blew Ryoshi through the air and back onto the awning he had just jumped from. It nearly tore from the force of his landing, but he was able to stabilize himself and check what had just happened. Standing before the villain was a 7-foot-tall muscled giant of a man, with a wide grin and uniquely styled long golden hair. Oh, Ryoshi realized, or All Might could show up. That works too. All Might grabbed the arm of the trapped blonde boy and wound his other arm back for a punch. Damn you, All Might, the villain screamed. Detroit Smash. Visaria chugged on the water bottle that had been in her backpack. Moving all that water around had really taken its toll. She could use some of the water in her body if she was desperate, but then she would puke and get a high fever. So she tended to use the water around her. Not to mention, she would become an icicle if she used her quirk for too long. There had been enough in the grass and in the air, so it wasn't that hard. but she often wondered if she could control other liquids. They acted the same as water. And what if she covered that said liquid in water? Would she be able to move it? It doesn't matter. As long as I can protect Izuku. She was debating on whether or not to grab something from the store to help her mother make dinner when she felt someone run into her. "Izu, there you are. Where were you all this time?" she asked her twin brother, who had a look of pure devastation. "Whoa, are you all right?" He only looked at the ground and nodded. "I'm fine." Azaria didn't push it any further when he started walking down the street, his sister on his heels. There was a wordless conversation between them, Azaria softly looking for an answer, with Izuku refusing to meet her eyes and not responding. "Hey," Azaria pointed out. "It looks like there is a fight going on over there." There was a crowd of people circling an alleyway with some heroes already there. A bunch of explosions signaled that there was a fight already going on. Azaria pulled Izuku over, hoping to snap him out of his daze. There was a Sudge-like villain deep in the alley, and there were at least 4 heroes already trying to stop this monster. Azaria saw her brother stiffen next to her, and he whispered, "It is me fault." She tilted her head and furrowed her eyebrows. "How could it be your fault?" she asked. "Why is it that the heroes are standing there doing nothing?" someone asked from the crowd. "I think that a schoolboy got caught," another man said. Izuku held his hands to his mouth and looked as though he was going to puke. Azaria put her hands on his shoulders and looked at him concerned. "Izu, are you okay?" He just shook his head and his eyes were full of panic and fear. "Isn't this the villain All Might pursued earlier?" a woman asked. "All Might, really? Do you think he will come? I've caught a glimpse of him before." "Well then, what's taking All Might so long?" Izuku only looked forward at the scene unfolding before him, and his eyes widened, and Azaria followed his gaze. Was that Bakugo? His terrified expression sent shivers down her spine, and she felt her jaw drop. She felt her blood freeze and her muscles tighten up. It was almost as if she couldn't move any part of her body. At her side, Izuku rushed through the crowd, shoving people out of the way and ducking under police tape. Azaria watched in wonder as he ran without thinking of his well-being. How can he move right now? She saw Izuku throw his backpack forward, hitting the monster square in the eye. It recoiled in pain, momentarily drawing away from Bakugo's face. Izuku was trying to use his hands to scrape the sludge off the hot-headed bully. Finally, her senses snapped together, and she ran after her brother, calling his name and asking if he had a death wish. People tried to stop her, but she dodged out of the way, jumping through fire and shoved her hands out, trying to take some sort of control of the sludge monster. When the villain was about to strike her brother, Azaria felt a knot in her gut, and she used her control to stop the sludge. She gritted her teeth when the knot became bigger as she used her other hand to move the sludge away from Bakugo's face. He took in a giant breath and tried to get out of the villain's grip. "Dobby, what the hell? Why are you here?" he demanded. "Because," Azaria said, forcing a smile to come on her face, still holding her hands in place, trying to keep the villain's movements to a minimum. "We couldn't just watch you die." Izuku finished, still trying to move the sludge out of the way. "I've had enough of you," the villain said, raising another sludge arm, meaning to smash the green-haired boy. Azaria let out a gasp of concentration and shut her eyes tightly, commanding the sludge to stay in its place, giving it no room to move at all. It was Azaria's will against the villain's, and right now, all she wanted to do was to protect her brother, and she would win. They will die needlessly. That's asking for suicide. She turned her head slightly to the heroes and gave them a look of expectancy. "Help us." Suddenly Azaria felt a whoosh of wind next to her. Her eyes snapped open, and she saw All Might, in all his glory, pull her brother back from the villain. "I really am pathetic," All Might admitted to Izuku as he held the villain back. "I lectured you about what it takes to be a hero, only to realize I wasn't living up to my own ideal." He grabbed one of Bakugo's arms and swung his other one back. "Detroit Smash." He punched the sludge with so much force that it exploded backwards and shot the villain back. Azaria felt the impact herself and stumbled backwards a few steps, trying to regain her balance. The clear sky was now turning cloudy and rainy, and it was all done with one punch. The knots in her chest had disappeared, and the sudden change combined with how much effort she gave into that incident made her stomach upset. She quickly looked over to the nearest bush that wasn't on fire and barfed. "It's raining?" Did he change the weather with just one punch? So cool. The true power of All Might. When everyone had recovered from their shock, some of the heroes started to scold Azaria and her brother, for good reason too. Though when Kamui Wood came up to the shivering green-haired girl and asked specifically what her quirk was, she was surprised. "Excuse me, young lady? You seem to know what you were doing out there. Saved us a couple minutes for All Might to show up. What's your quirk?" He looked at her through his wooden mask curiously. Azaria blinked away some of the rain that was lightly sprinkling down. "Well, I think it's called Aqua Talk, Mr. Kamui Wood, sir." He chuckled slightly at her. "You don't have to call me sir, miss. What exactly does your quirk do?" "Oh, sorry." The girl scratched the back of her head. "Well, usually I use my quirk to control the water in the air or on the ground. But recently I've learned that I can take water out of things, such as flowers or grass." She paused. "And I've even experimented on myself and found out that I can take the water out of the cells in my body and control it." Azaria nervously laughed. "But after I did that I puked. I think it was due to the strain. Also I get really cold afterward. I suggest not running into danger like that again. You could have gotten seriously hurt." He told her, taking a seat next to her on the side of the curb. "It wasn't my idea." The green-haired girl looked over to her twin. "My brother ran out there first, and I knew he couldn't do it by himself." She frowned at her now wet hair and kindly moved the water so it looked like there was an invisible umbrella above her and Kamui Wood. He looked up and noticed the slight change and tilted his head. "When you graduate high school, I recommend coming to the agency I work for. We could really use someone like you." He stood up and offered a hand to her. Azaria shrugged and took his hand, regaining her balance. "It doesn't matter what I want." She looked over to her brother again, who was being told off by another hero. "I'm doing what Izuku wants to do." Even though most of the heroes were lecturing the green-haired kids, a couple of them had found Ricky and made sure he knew how crazy it was for him to race right into a dangerous situation. Ricky just nodded and apologized as they talked, and also began putting his phone back together. He hadn't actually fired the device, so everything should work just fine if he put it back together right. "Hey," a voice called. "You with the antenna." Ricky looked up to see the same boy who jumped from the awning walking up to him. "You," one of the heroes said. "You're even worse. Do you have any idea how much you could have been hurt from the fall alone?" The boy just nodded and continued his walk over to Ricky. "I saw you," Ricky said, standing back up. "You jumped at him from the left." "Yeah," the boy said. "Your run from the right distracted the heroes and gave me an easier time getting across without drawing the heroes' attention." "Good thinking." "Well, so you were trying to distract us?" one of the heroes exclaimed. Ricky raised an eyebrow. "Truthfully, I wasn't thinking at all. My brain just sort of went on autopilot." "Interesting," the boy said. "The second I saw the situation, a plan formed in my head." "A plan?" Ricky asked. "I wish." "You too," yelled the unmistakable voice of All Might. He strode over to them, and the press followed like a swarm of moths. "I saw what you two tried," All Might said. "You both have the makings of true heroes. But next time, please leave it to the professionals. Inexperienced fighters can make a bad situation worse." "Yes, sir," the boy said. "Sorry," Ricky apologized, straining to look high up at All Might's face. "Ha ha 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 ha," All Might bellowed. "Just save the heroics until you actually become heroes. Then we're good." All Might returned his attention to the press, and the boy looked over at the green-haired twins. Those two, he said. Do you think they know that boy? Or just wanted to help like us? I guess I wouldn't be surprised if they did, Ricky said. No way to know for sure though. Wrong, the boy said flatly. Let's go ask them. Well, I guess we can. Ricky's ringtone suddenly played from his newly reassembled phone. He checked the screen. Oh, Ricky said. It's my parents. They probably saw the news. He picked up the phone and put it to his ear. Hey Mo, are you out of your mind? His mother screamed through the receiver with all the rage and fear of a worried parent. His father grabbed the phone from her. She's pretty livid right now, kid, he said. You'd better get home. Gotcha, Ricky said promptly. I gotta go, he said to the boy. It was nice meeting you though. The boy nodded and Ricky began the rest of his trip home. As the antenna boy walked off in the other direction, Ryoshi took a moment to consider him. His quirk was some kind of technology-based power, judging by how he was seemingly planning to use his phone as some kind of electrical weapon, and also by how he seemingly put it back together with his mind. The way those parts were swirling around his hand. Was that some kind of technokinesis? Ryoshi thought. I wonder what the full extent of his power is. His mind quickly switching subjects, he turned his attention to the green-haired kids that had rushed the villain first. You too, he called to them. They both looked over in his direction, and the boy spoke. Oh yeah, he said shakily. I saw you trying to help, right before All Might showed up. I'm Izuku Midoriya, and this is Izaria Midoriya, the girl said. We're twins. Ryoshi Chaisai, Ryoshi said. What was your strategy? Did you know that boy in danger? You rushed in without a second thought. Izuku looked over to the blonde boy, who was being praised for his bravery and endurance during the incident. Oh yeah, that's Bakugo, Izuku said. He's a bully, Azaria said defiantly. All right, yeah, Izuku admitted. But we used to be friends, and I couldn't just watch it happen. I guess I kinda moved without thinking, which I guess is pretty dumb when you think about it, especially since I'm quirkless. Quirkless? Ryoshi said in surprise, slightly taken aback. And you just rushed in? Now that was surprising. Ryoshi could barely fathom going in without a plan, much less rushing in with no quirk to bring to the fight. How could... Suddenly, Ryoshi's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and looked at the screen, seeing a new text from his father. Come home now, please, it said. Yikes. Ryoshi slipped his phone back into his pocket and looked up at the twins. I have to go, he said. Oh, okay, Izuku said, slightly confused. It was nice meeting you. Ryoshi nodded and continued on the route he was on before this whole thing happened. Although he had definitely lost some time, back up to 15 minutes. The sun was already setting when the twins decided to walk home. Izaria had tried everything to get her brother to tell her what happened to him before, but he refused to tell her, so they walked in silence, Izaria constantly sending worried looks to her side, her imagination running wild about what happened to Izuku. Hey, Deku, Izaria. The twins turned to see a rather angry Bakugo who looked out of breath, like he had run the whole way to them. Izaria immediately took a defensive step in front of her brother and glared at the boy in front of them. She placed her hands on her hips and stared in defiance. What do you want? I never asked for you two to come and help me. I didn't need to be saved. I can take care of myself. You got that? He turned to Izuku and glared. I don't owe either of you anything. And with that, he turned around and stormed off. There must be something wrong with his head. Izaria deadpanned and looked at her brother, who nodded absently. I am here, a familiar booming voice exclaimed. Huh? The twins squeaked out as a very recognizable hero appeared. Izaria stood in shock as All Might came around the corner. Her jaw basically dropped to the ground, and she began to shake her brother. Izu, that's All Might. Yeah, Aria. I know, now stop shaking me. He turned his attention to the superhero in front of him. All Might, what are you doing here? You were surrounded by reporters earlier. I can avoid them if I want to. After all, I'm All Might. Suddenly the hero coughed up some blood and his form shrunk into someone who more resembled a walking skeleton. Gah, what the hell? Wait, who's this? This is my twin sister Azaria. Why does All Might know you? It's a long story, Aria. Azaria made a timeout signal with her hands. Okay, before we get any further in this conversation, I just want to say that I'm a big fan. Also, why did you just deflate like that? And why do you know Izuku personally? All Might chuckled a little bit. Now I remember you. You're the girl who ran after young Izuku in the fire. I have to admit, I'm impressed. Not many people can charge into danger like that. Aria, like I said, it's a really long story, and we don't have time for that right now. I'll tell you later tonight, but there was one thing that I wanted to do. He turned to the pro-hero and started to apologize. All Might held his hands out for silence, and Izuku stopped. Kid, I came to thank you and make some corrections. And I also have a proposal for you. Huh? If you hadn't run out there, if you hadn't told me your life story, I'd still be as scared as ever. I'm sorry I hesitated. Life story? Azaria asked. But her brother shushed her and responded. Don't be. The whole thing is my fault. I disrupted you during your work. And I don't even have a quirk. Azaria turned to Izuku with a confused yet sympathetic expression. About that, the twins' heads lifted up to see the sun setting in the background. At that time, no one could act. You are the only one who could do it. You, a shy boy who doesn't have a quirk. And that reminded me about what it means to be a hero. The stories of many pro-heroes began with situations nearly identical to this. They all have one thing in common. Their bodies moved before they could think. Izuku began to tremble, and his sister held him up. Some say that by the time most kids are in middle school, you can determine who will be a more successful hero based on their quirk. But I'm here to tell you something different. What I saw in you today is something I've seen in heroes everywhere. It's something I see in myself. Azaria held on to her brother as he almost fell over. You ran straight into danger without thinking, because you knew saving that boy was the right thing to do, no matter what happened to you. Am I right? All Might continued. Why, yes, Izuku managed to get out. All Might smiled. Young man, you too can become a hero. Both siblings sank to the ground, crying in each other's arms. Izuku for happiness, and the memories of hearing all the wrong things Azaria. Happy that her brother won't have to go through the pain of losing his dream after all his hard work. That was the sentence he needed to hear. You are worthy of inheriting my strength. The hero in front of them exclaimed, waving his hands around. Huh? The twins said once again. What's your quirk called? Whenever it's brought up in interviews, I always dodge the question or change the subject. All Might explained. Because the truth is a closely guarded secret. Your quirk, Izuku said. The name of my quirk is One for All. All Might said. One for all, the twins repeated. I wasn't born with this power. It's a sacred torch that's been passed down to me from someone else, All Might explained. I can transfer my quirk to another. Azaria couldn't believe what she was hearing. This sounded downright insane. One person improves the power, All Might continued, then passes it down to the next wielder. As you can probably tell, it's getting tough for me to keep doing this on my own. And it would be a shame to let your heroic attitude go to waste. Which is why I have chosen you as my successor. Do you accept? Why, yes, Izuku yelled through tears and sobbing. All Might smiled. Then we'd better get to work, young Midoriyas. Chapter 5. The Only One Cheering. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Azaria yawned into her hand as she, her brother, and All Might walked to the beach for the very last time. They had been doing this every day for 10 months, and the girl frequently joined them for exercise sessions. Not to brag, but Azaria finally had some abs. But she didn't just work on her body, but her state of mind as well. Since Izuku was getting a quirk, Azaria no longer hesitated to use her power when she had the chance. She practiced over and over the cooling of water, so she wouldn't have to give it much thought when she tried to freeze it. Not only that, but also scalding water as well. But her main focus was to learn what her max was before throwing up and not being able to move her fingers. She could make some decent-sized waves if she wanted, able to use the water from the ocean to her advantage. That was what had taken the most time, and also some crazy control which All Might actually helped her with. She had meditated once with her brother and discovered that the water in the air could tell her exactly what was going on. The invisible water to everyone else was like a spotlight to Azaria. When the water called for her attention, she took advantage of it and commanded them to describe what they could see. But there was a small problem. The coldness that always seeped in after about 30 minutes of using her quirk caused Azaria's power to weaken. 30 minutes if she was lucky, and if she wasn't using an extreme amount of control. Azaria jumped when she heard someone screaming. She quickly ran over to where the noise was coming from and saw Izuku standing on a pile of trash, yelling to his heart's content. She let out a gasp when she saw that all of the trash had been moved and the beach was now clear. "Kid, you cleaned the entire area, and even beyond where I told you to. Holy, stinking, super crap," All Might said as he transformed into his hero form. Izuku swayed uneasily and fell from the hill, All Might catching him just in time. "You've earned a good rest." "All Might? I did it. I did it. And you did an astonishing job. Here." The pro hero held out his cell phone. "Take a look at this." Azaria peeked her head from around him and asked, "What's that?" "Why, that's Izuku 10 months ago." On his phone was a picture of Izuku, scrawny and collapsed on the beach, a far cry to his far more muscular build now. "You really did good, kid." The green-haired girl looked over to her brother and held her hands out. "I'm so proud of you, Izu. Only you would come this far and still keep going." The siblings embraced and held to each other tightly. When they pulled away, they both laughed and turned to All Might. "So, what's next?" The hero tugged a piece of his hair from his head, smiling brightly. "You've walked a long road to obtain this power, and your persistence has only strengthened my decision to accept you as my successor," All Might said. He then offered the golden hair to Izuku. "Now, eat this." "Come again?" the twins said in a weak voice. "Do you have an extra pair of shoes?" Sakito asked. "Yes," Ryoshi said, packing his backpack. "Your phone?" "Yes." "Money for the train to UA?" "Yes." "Money for the train ride back?" "Yes." "Your gym clothes?" "Yes." "Your pencils?" "Yes." "Your notepad?" "Yes." "Your—" "That's enough," Rikishi said, walking into the front room. "Sakito, he's the one who reminds us what to pack. I think he's fine." "Oh, I know," Sakito said. "I'm just making sure. You got your brain?" "Of course," Ryoshi said, grinning slightly proudly. "Good," Sakito said, rustling his hair up. "Use it." "My thoughts exactly," Rikishi agreed. "Both in the written and the practical exam. Remember, quirks are secondary to one's strategy and intuition." "Yeah, I know," Ryoshi said. "I think about it more than anyone." Rikishi grinned and wagged his finger. "Don't be so sure," he said. "I'd wager you're not the only aspiring hero taking the exam today that understands that. Wait until you see what they can do before you place their skill relative to yours. Never underestimate." "Right," Ryoshi remembered. "Thank you." He swung his backpack onto his shoulders and opened the front door. "You'll do great," Sakito encouraged. "Stay safe. We love you." "Thank you," Ryoshi replied. "I love you too." With that, he stepped out and closed the door, leaving his parents by themselves in the front room. Sakito took a deep breath before turning to her husband. Are you sure this is the right path for him? She asked nervously. Rikishi nodded. I took a look inside his mind last night. The door is still locked, and the darkness has almost entirely dispersed in his mindscape. I don't see that memory affecting him anymore. In fact, I think the hero track is a perfect way for his mind to begin forming a new mindscape, ideally a happy one. He looked up towards the door, smiling. I feel as though I can finally say, he'll be all right. Area? Izuku asked from the stairs of their dream school. Izaria turned her attention to her brother as he stared at the doors. Yeah, Izu? He narrowed his eyes slightly and took in a deep breath. I just wanted to say good luck on the exam, before all the craziness happens. The girl smiled and nodded. Me too. Hopefully we get into the same class too. It wouldn't be the same if you weren't there with me. She looked at the students walking into the building in front of them. I'm going to save us some seats, okay? Will you be okay without me for a few? Izuku nodded vigorously. Yes, I'll be fine. Okay. Izaria hurried to the entrance, not running, but not exactly walking either. She kept glancing back to see her brother doing fine, so she assumed that he would be okay. Hey! An angry voice called from behind her. Izaria knew that voice anywhere. Her smile dropped into a frown and she scowled, not even turning around. What do you want, Bakugo? The green-haired girl asked, her voice full of venom. Izaria heard whispers from around her, and she could tell that people had already begun to talk. There was a shoe scuffle to her right side, and suddenly Bakugo was in front of her. His ash-blonde hair was spiked up as ever, his red eyes full of determination. You're the only person I want to beat today. Your useless nerd brother won't even make it into this school, but I know you will. And what if I don't, huh? What are you going to do then? He smirked, and Izaria felt a shiver go down her spine. Then I'll know that I'm better than you, and that you're all talk when it comes to fighting. Izaria found her hands curling into fists. She wanted to smash him to the ground right now, but that would probably get her ejected before the entrance exam started. She could smack him, but that would lead to a fight that she wouldn't be able to control. The best thing that she could do was prove him wrong, by beating him in the exams and getting the highest score. That would leave him so ticked off, which would be so much more satisfying for her. She forced her face into a look of disinterest. Yeah, well, good thing that I'm going to beat you. I'll get the highest score, just watch me. You'll be left in the dust. She paused and moved around him to get into the school. Just before she passed him all the way, she could see the provoked look on his face, and she smiled to herself. That's what you get for hurting Izu for all those years. Welcome to today's live performance, Present Mike yelled. Ricky had been approved to take the UA high entrance exam, and none other than the voice hero. Present Mike was giving them the details on the exam. Ricky had listened to his show all the time, and liked how he was always full of energy. It was honestly kind of contagious. Let me hear you say yeah, Present Mike yelled. He looked around the crowd, but nobody responded, so Ricky took it upon himself. Yeah, UA. Hi, whoa. Ricky screamed at the top of his lungs. Present Mike whipped his head over in Ricky's direction to find him standing out of his seat, his hands cupped around his mouth. Yeah, I'm feeling it. At least one of you is hyped up, Present Mike yelled, giving Ricky a thumbs up. Ricky had gotten better with socializing and friends in the past months. He figured if he was brave enough to charge a murderous sludge villain, the least he could do was expand his comfort zone. High school represented a great opportunity to reinvent himself and make lots of new friends. And even if you didn't cheer, that's okay, Present Mike continued. Because I'm here to make up for it, by explaining the UA high entrance exam. Are you ready? Silence again, so Ricky spoke up again. I'm ready, he yelled. Present Mike turned and pointed at him. My man, keep it up, Present Mike applauded. He turned back to the rest of the audience. Here is how the test will go, my listeners, he yelled. You'll be experiencing mock cityscape maneuvers. After this presentation, You'll all head to the testing location on the handout you were given. Each site is filled with 3 kinds of faux villains. Use your quirks to disable the faux villains and earn points. That's your goal, listeners. Present Mike finished. Of course, playing the antihero and attacking other examinees is prohibited. You'll be disqualified, so play nice, you dig? Ricky checked his handout. There were 4 villains listed, not 3. Was this a mistake? Or a test of some kind? Excuse me, may I ask a question? A tall blue-haired kid had stood up from his seat. The light from the stage reflected off of his glasses, painting the lenses with a white cover obscuring his eyes. Go for it, kiddo, Present Mike said. The young man brought out his handout, turned to the faux villains page. There appear to be no fewer than 4 varieties of faux villain listed on the handout, he pointed out. Such a blatant error, if it is one, is highly unbecoming of UA, Japan's top academy. We're all here today in the hopes of being molded into model heroes. The kid turned to someone else in the crowd. And you, the one with the unkempt hair? He pointed at another applicant, one with messy, deep green hair. Was that the same kid that charged the sludge villain? He recognized the girl next to him as well, noticing the same trademark green hair. They were both here as well. You've been muttering this entire time. It's distracting. If you see this as some kind of game, I suggest you leave now, he accused. The green-haired kid covered his mouth and squeaked out an apology. The green-haired girl next to him scowled and was about to say something back at the glasses boy. But the one who was mumbling shook his head and pulled down on her arm. She reluctantly stayed quiet, but rolled her eyes when her gaze lingered on the glasses boy. All right, Present Mike responded. Applicant 7111, nice catch. Thanks. But the 4th faux villain is worth 0 points. There's 1 in each area, and it's more of an obstacle for you to avoid. The glasses boy stroked his chin in thought. So it's like a stage gimmick, to be avoided. Got it. Thank you, sir. I apologize for the interruption. He sat back down. Hey, don't sweat it, kid. And for everyone else, that's all for me. I'll leave my listeners with our school motto. True heroism consists in being superior to the ills of life, in whatever shape they may challenge us to combat. Present Mike spread his hands out toward the audience. Plus ultra. Break a leg, everyone. And best of luck, my hyped-up friend. He directed the last part to Ricky. The applicants all stood up and began filing out of the stadium, glancing at their handouts. Test Area 5. Ricky thought, scanning the sidewalk paths in front of him. He found the one with the big number 5 and followed it around the UA High campus, along with a number of other applicants. Soon, they had reached the testing ground and were waiting at the gate to the exam. Present Mike's voice came over the loudspeaker. All right, my awesome applicants. Your UA High entrance exam starts in 5 seconds. Here we go, one of the applicants muttered. 5. I'll get in for sure, another shouted. 4. I'll blow past all of you losers. 3. Okay, just bust robots and get points. Simple. 2. This couldn't be easier. 1. 101, 1001, 101, 1, 101, 1, 1 side, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1000, 1, 1, 1000, 1001, 1, 2, 1000, 1, 101, 1, 1, 1, 1000 is 1, 1, 1, 1000, 1, 1, 1000, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1000, 1, 1, 101, 1, 1, Ricky thought. And go. The die is cast, Present Mike yelled. The gate swung open, and the applicants made a mad dash for the testing ground. They quickly dispersed across the area, searching for faux villains to destroy. This is perfect, Ricky thought. All I need to do is wait for someone else to destroy a villain. And his thoughts were cut off by some extreme, shouting right around the corner from him. Come get some, you stupid robots. I'll be here all day. Ricky quickly turned the corner and found an applicant with a mullet of silver hair, smashing a faux villain to pieces with his bare hands. His arms were coated in metal, which he was using to smash the machine. Ricky dove into the pile of scrap, which resulted in a confused grunt from the mullet kid. There's a lot of good stuff in here. Turbines, treads, laser emitters. Let me try. Yes, perfect. Ricky willed some of the intact pieces of the faux villain to form around his arm, and he shaped them to fit around his hand. He mounted a laser to the front of his gauntlet and a turbine to the back. He also fitted a pair of treads to his legs, able to move down onto his feet for quick travel. Perfect. Hey, I didn't know these villains could take over other kids. The mullet kid exclaimed, preparing to smash Ricky to pieces. Whoa there, Silver Mullet. It's just my quirk. Cool it. Ricky quickly explained. The mullet kid stopped and looked Ricky over, the situation clicking into place. Ha ha, sorry about that, he said sheepishly. But I'm not Silver Mullet. The name's Tetsu. Tetsu said. Ricky raised an eyebrow as he and Tetsu kept moving through the test area. Tetsu? Ricky asked. Fun to say, am I right? Tetsu said with a toothy grin. He had pointed teeth, not unlike Kirishima's. Suddenly, a faux villain burst through a building next to Tetsu. Look out! Ricky yelled, blasting the villain with his arm laser. At the same time, Tetsu lunged at a villain that would have caught Ricky off guard and smashed it to pieces with his steel. He turned and grinned at Ricky. Lucky, huh? He remarked. Ricky was intrigued at what had just happened and began considering the implications of a team-up. Well, see ya later, Tetsu said, starting to run in another direction. No, wait, I have an idea, Ricky called back. Huh? What's up? Tetsu asked, turning back around. If we have each other's backs, we can stay in the fight for longer and get more points, Ricky explained. Tetsu nodded slowly, then grinned. Yeah, I get it. Sounds like a plan. Kid, what's your name again? He asked. Ricky realized he hadn't introduced himself. Oh, sorry, Koguriki Mukitsu. But you can just call me Ricky, he said. All right, Ricky, let's do this. The two made their way throughout the testing ground, destroying as many faux villains as they could, while also having each other's backs. They turned a corner, met with around 10 faux villains waiting for them. Tetsu smashed a few, and Ricky blasted a couple, but more kept coming, and soon they were surrounded. We can't take 'em all, Tetsu said. We should probably just get out of here and find some other villains. Yeah, good idea, Ricky replied. They tried to flee, but were met with more villains blocking their path. They were surrounded. Nothing we can do, we gotta fight, Tetsu decided. But there's too many of them, Ricky said as he shot at a villain, but missed. Suddenly, a mass of roots erupted from the ground and trapped the faux villains in place, allowing Tetsu and Ricky to finish them off. What was that about? Tetsu demanded. Hi, said someone from above them. Ricky looked up to see a girl sitting on top of a vine. Her black hair went down to her shoulders, framing her face perfectly. Oddly enough, her hair seemed to give off a greenish hue. Hey, thanks for the save, whoever you are, Tetsu called. Keiko Budenoki, a pleasure, Budenoki said. I gotta say, I saw how you guys are teaming up. It's super cool, like a storm of awesome. Can I join? Ricky considered the possibilities. Her quirk obviously involved plants, and if she could do what she just did, clearing out crowds of faux villains would be a cinch. The name's Koguriki Mukitsu, Ricky said. The more, the merrier, right? Welcome aboard. And I'm Tetsu. Your quirk is pretty cool, Tetsu said. Hey, thanks, I like your name, Budenoki replied. Let's get moving, Ricky said. We've got lots of villains to destroy, he said enthusiastically. He moved his treads down to his feet and activated them, now moving at a much faster speed. Budenoki followed on her vines, matching his speed. Hey guys, wait up, Tetsu called, dashing with all his might. Don't worry, I gotcha, Budenoki said, grabbing Tetsu with a root. Hey Mukitsu, what's your quirk anyway? Is it that arm cannon? Budenoki asked as she threw Tetsu at a villain. You want some, stupid robot? Come get it, Tetsu shouted. Not exactly, Ricky clarified. I can control all technology. I also have an electric current in my body, so I can power tech as well. There's also an antenna on my back I can use to interface with wireless devices and listen to radio stations. Wow, so cool, Budenoki said as she grabbed Tetsu with one root and smashed a villain with another. Heh, thanks, Ricky said. And, you can just call me Ricky. That was great. Do that again, Tetsu said to Budenoki. Owa, we already destroyed all the robots here pretty awesomely, Budenoki said. We'd better move on. I'm sure there are more villains to smash further up. Oh, that was fast, Tetsu realized. The three of them moved on, both destroying robots and saving each other from ambushes and stealth attacks. They spotted the gimmick villain further away, but decided to avoid it, as President Mike had suggested. The further into the city they got, the fewer villains they saw. Ricky theorized that the center was where all the applicants went. Die, 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 screamed someone ahead of Ricky. Their group of three went to see who was screaming, and found a spiky-haired blonde kid incinerating a faux villain with his quirk. Explosions burst from his palms, and he was attacking three villains at once with reckless abandon. Is that kid? With the sludge villain? He's here too? Ricky thought to himself. What are you looking at, you walking radio? The spiky kid asked. Ricky realized he was staring. Oh, nothing, sorry, Ricky quickly replied. Are you saying my quirk is nothing? He yelled back at Ricky. Chill out, Spiky. The explosions are just crazy awesome, right? Budenoki said. Ha, damn right they are. But I don't need compliments from extras like you. The kid stalked off to find some other villains to destroy. Geez, what's his deal? Tetsu remarked. And it's over, rang the voice of President Mike over the loudspeaker. Begin, rang the announcer's voice. Get moving, applicants. The large door swung open, and the crowd of students standing there suddenly surged forward. Ryoshi tried to stay near the edge, so he wouldn't be trapped in the middle, and was among the first to step into the fake city. His current goal was to separate as much as he could, keeping to the less crowded spots of the city to get as many robots to himself as possible. He ducked into an alleyway, running to the end which separated into three different paths. He took the front path, and he immediately fell to his knees, barely dodging a robot's massive arm from coming down on him. He rolled on the ground and turned around to look over the robot. That's a three-pointer, he realized. All right then, let's get to work. He quickly made a plan and jumped out of the robot's attack. He spread his arms out to his sides, flexing his fingers, waiting for the right moment as the robot rolled aggressively towards him. The red laser emitter on its head began glowing and heating up, and Ryoshi flicked his hand up, and the robot's head snapped upward with a metallic groan and a brief flash of purple light. He clenched his fist and pulled, and the laser emitter shattered and was pulled out of its socket. The robot looked back down at Ryoshi and wound its bulky arm back, then sent it forward with a deep whir of its motors. Ryoshi put his hand up in front of the robot's arm, and a purple aura lit up around it, stopping it in place. Ryoshi stepped back, closed his fist and pulled to the side, tearing off a portion of the robot's arm. He flung it into the robot's other arm, which had been readying for another attack. Chunks of both of the arms flew off in random directions. Ryoshi spread his fingers, trying to reach out to the biggest ones. HNNG, he grunted, as a pressure began building behind his eyes, subsiding as quick as it had come. I underestimated how heavy they were, and how much force it would take to cancel their momentum. I used a higher force than I'm used to, he thought. But now, he closed his fists and punched at the air with both arms, which drew all the debris into two large masses and sent them both flying at the robot's head. The first one damaged the head, and the second one sheared it clean off, sending the rest of the machine falling to the ground in a loud metallic crash. That's 3 points, Ryoshi thought. Hearing the various booms and crashes from the rest of the city spurred him to act. No time to lose, he thought as he ran back out of the alley, leaving the mess behind. The test just started, so everyone must still be around here. No doubt most of the bots are in the center, so I need to get there fast before there aren't enough left, he thought. He ran out of another alley and into an open road, where no less than 3 robots were waiting there. 2 1-points and a 2-point, Ryoshi thought. I'll need her. Bonjour. A higher-pitched voice greeted from his left. Suddenly, a bright blue glittery beam fired from an alleyway, impaling the 2-point. Once again, parts flew off in all directions, prompting Ryoshi to reach out to them psychically. A bright blonde applicant stepped out of the alleyway and did a little flourish, but Ryoshi ignored him. Learning from his last mistake just a minute prior, instead of completely changing the direction of the debris, he altered their trajectories and curved them around while maintaining their speed. He sent them flying into one of the 1-points, destroying it. He kept his hold on the assorted broken robot pieces and ran forward towards the last 1-point, which was currently cornering someone else. He converged the parts into another mass of debris and launched it right at the 1-point's head. It crashed to the ground, revealing the quivering boy it was cornering. That was Izuku Midoriya, Ryoshi recalled. That was the boy that charged the sludge villain. Aren't you quirkless? He asked. Before Midoriya could respond, a loud crashing sound came from further ahead. A few more robots were fighting another group of students. Ooh, sorry, no time to talk, bye, Midoriya said frantically as he ran ahead. Ryoshi stood for a moment, then snapped back into action. What am I doing? He's right, Ryoshi thought. He doesn't matter right now, I need more points. He levitated several broken parts and loose bits of asphalt from the ground, running forward towards the city center. Even though several students had already been through the area, robots still emerged from behind buildings or walls on the way to the center. Ryoshi destroyed all the robots he saw, recycling his levitating weapons with new ones from other robots as they broke. He counted 3 3-points, 4 2-points, and 6 1-points, putting him at 28 points by the time he reached the center. By now, it was a crowd of students, each scrambling and scraping for every possible point as robots continued to emerge. Ryoshi destroyed another 7 3-points, a 1-point, and 5 2-points, indirectly rescuing a couple struggling applicants along the way. The robots were becoming more and more scarce, and a couple minutes had gone by without Ryoshi getting a single point. Is it almost over? Ryoshi wondered. It has been a while. Suddenly, a loud, dull, strong sound came vibrating through the ground. Ryoshi looked ahead, seeing an enormous robot that absolutely dwarfed the others. It rolled forward slowly with a loud grinding noise coming from its treads. That's the 0-point, Ryoshi realized. We're supposed to avoid that one. Ryoshi began backing away with the other students, seeing no reason in fighting the 0-point. Wait, Ryoshi thought, squinting at the ground below the 0-point. What was? Is that? There's a girl trapped in the wreckage. The brown-haired girl was trapped under a large chunk of loose concrete, a piece of concrete that was in the direct path of the 0-point. Is she? Surely UA wouldn't let her get crushed, right? What could I possibly? Suddenly, an earth-shattering crack erupted from the road, a bit further ahead, accompanied by a strong burst of wind pressure. Somebody was flying up into the air. No, had they jumped? A lone applicant had jumped several hundred feet up into the air, coming up to the 0-point's massive face. Ryoshi squinted. Was that Midoriya? He gasped out loud. Midoriya wound his arm back and punched the 0-point straight in the face with a force that seemed to rival even All Might's. The robot's face was crushed inward, and the enormous mechanical behemoth tipped backward and came crashing to the ground. Unfortunately for Midoriya, the same began happening to him. With no way to get to the ground safely, he began free-falling straight for the hard, solid asphalt. Almost instantly, Ryoshi completely analyzed the situation. He looks about my weight, so I can estimate his acceleration due to gravity, he thought, levitating several stray robot parts and concrete bits as he ran forward. That jump looks about 300 feet high, so he'll hit the ground in approximately 6.5 seconds. He's 100 feet away, and I run at an average of 8 miles per hour. Doing the math. Ryoshi sped up, pushing his legs as fast as they would go after he realized he wouldn't make it at his current speed. Midoriya fell closer and closer to the ground when, slap. The girl that had been trapped on the ground smacked him in the face as he passed, leaving a pink flash of light as her hand contacted his cheek. Quickly, Midoriya began slowing down until he was suspended in the air mere inches above the ground. Our release, the girl said, pressing her hands together. Midoriya landed on the ground with a gentle thud, perfectly undamaged. Well, except for the enormous bruising on his arm, and the fact that his legs were both bending the complete wrong way. Ryoshi stared in awe as Midoriya tried crawling forward despite his obviously broken limbs. If I could get just 1 point, Midoriya sputtered weakly. Suddenly, a loud buzzer noise came from speakers scattered all around the city. And the voice of President Mike said, "It's over. Move it." Azaria yelled as she pulled another boy away from the 0-point robot. It was about to smash the teenager to the ground, but Azaria had stepped in and pulled him away before it could happen. "Thank you," he said after they had made enough space in between them. He had blonde hair that was swept to the right with bright blue-purple eyes under slightly droopy eyelids. Azaria saw a 2-point robot coming at them, and she coated her hand in ice before punching right through it. "No problem. Just keep your guard up. Stay by me if you aren't ready to go out yet. I'll protect you." The blonde boy looked at her with admiration and surprise. He had thought that everyone was out to get the most points possible in this contest, but it seemed as though this girl had no problem losing a few to make sure that no one was hurt. His usual sarcastic and down-putting demeanor was stripped away as he stared in wonder. His cheeks began to heat up as he looked at the girl in a different light. She was like an angel. It was like a veil or halo was above her, giving her more beauty than he had ever seen. "Thank you," was all he managed to say. "Don't worry about it." Azaria turned to look back at the boy she had saved and smiled with closed eyes. "We all have to be protected sometimes, right?" All he did was nod back at her. The blonde then stopped and pointed at another robot coming towards them. "Watch out." Without hesitation, he tapped her shoulder. He then copied Azaria's motions and covered his fist in ice, smashing right through the robot. The green-haired girl looked at him in surprise. "Interesting. Your quirk, does it replicate other powers?" He nodded. "Yes, but your quirk seems to be more powerful than others." "Oh yeah." Azaria let out a nervous chuckle. "It might be overwhelming at first. I've had to put a lot of effort in order to find the right amount of control. May I know your name, since you did save my life?" The blonde boy asked, giving her a smile. "Oh, it's Midoriya, but you can call me by my first name, Azaria," she explained and gave a breathy laugh. "I have a sibling around here, and I don't mind others using my name." The blonde boy could only hear the melodic sound of her laugh, and felt himself sighing on the inside. "My name is Nito Monoma, and you can call me Nito if you want." There was a loud crashing noise, and Azaria turned to see another boy who had been thrown against a wall. She motioned for the blonde to follow her and ran over to the person in need, taking out some robots as she went. "Are you all right?" she asked, shaking the boy's shoulders. He blinked a few times before touching his feathered raven-like head. "Yes, I am fine. I just didn't anticipate an attack from behind." "That's okay. I'm here to help." She quickly brought out a short water whip and used it to take off the robot's head with ease. Azaria wiped her forehead with the back of her hand and suppressed a shiver. "The exam is not what I expected. Thank you for doing that for me," the boy with the raven head said, getting up. Suddenly a shadow emerged from the second boy and destroyed a robot that was coming from the left of them. Azaria waved her hand and stared at the shadow with a confused face, but then shook her head as if she was dismissing the thought. "Don't sweat it. 5 minutes left, people. I repeat, 5 minutes." Azaria frowned and tried to spot some nearby robots. HPMH, I'm not where I want to be right now. She turned to the other almost UA students and looked them up and down. You guys aren't hurt, right? If not, then I'm going to head off on my own. I think we'll be fine, the blonde said to her, respecting her decision. The green-haired girl gave them a thumbs up before giving a slight smile. Okay then, see you guys at school when we all make it. Then Azaria took off, trying to find as many robots as possible to destroy before time ran out. Chapter 6. Just a Bully. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Ricky, go get the mail, would you? Ricky's brother asked. Yeah, whatever, Ricky said, annoyed at doing his brother's chores. He walked out to the mailbox and grabbed its contents with an annoyed sigh. He went back inside and flipped through the mail. Bills, junk, a letter from UA. Hi, junk, Billo. Ricky flipped back a few envelopes and found a letter addressed to him, from UA. Hi. He let out a small gasp as he frantically put the rest of the mail on the counter and started dashing up to his room. Hey, why the rush? His brother asked. Ricky ignored him and flew right up the stairs. Okay then, his brother noted. Ricky closed the door to his room and began tearing the envelope open. Suddenly, something burst out of the sleeve and landed on the ground, displaying a hologram. I am here, the booming voice of All Might said. As a hologram, Ricky looked up to see the hologram of All Might standing in front of a scoreboard. All Might, Ricky exclaimed. I'll be evaluating your score on the entrance exam, young Mukitsu, All Might explained. Ricky's name came up on the board behind All Might, his points listed as well. Under Rescue, it said 36 points. Under Villain, 35 points, for a total of 71. I must say, the way you teamed up with Mr. Tetsu and Miss Budenoki was extremely well done, and you'll be happy to hear they both made it in as well, All Might revealed. Their point values came on screen as well. 67 for Tetsu and 65 for Budenoki. Wait, as well? Does that mean? Ricky thought aloud. And yes, young Mukitsu, you made the cut. How could we turn away someone who not only destroyed several villains and displayed masterful proficiency with their power, but also someone who was not afraid to both give and accept help when the situation called for it? There is more to being a hero than smashing villains. You have the makings of a true hero. And to that end, you're in. Class starts next week, and everything else is in the envelope. Young Mukitsu, I'll see you at school. And with that, the hologram ended. Ricky sat back in his desk chair, processing what he had just seen. There was only one thing he could think to say. Azaria stared at her brother as he sat at the table, not eating anything, holding a fried piece of fish to his mouth. She tilted her head so far that some of her hair touched the table. Izuku? Their mother said with a frightened look on her face. Are you all right? Why are you smiling vacantly at the fish? Oh, sorry. I'm okay. After the family had eaten their dinner, the twins made their way to the couch, where Izuku exercised his hands. Azaria shot him some concerned glances, but he didn't return them. This had been going on the whole week. Izuku roamed the house in a daze, with Azaria not far behind, making sure he didn't run into a wall. She could tell that he was being hard on himself from the exam, and after he told her that he had gotten 0 points, she began to panic on the inside. She didn't want to go to UA. If Izuku wasn't going, it just wouldn't work. Azaria would have to tolerate Bakugo all by herself, and certainly wasn't something she could do, despite all her bravado. So if Izuku didn't get into UA, then neither was Azaria, and no one could change her mind. She would avoid the stares and whispers about why she didn't go, and try to be a hero with her brother another way. Oh yeah, aren't the test results supposed to come today or tomorrow? Their mother asked from the kitchen. Azaria saw Izuku stiffen from the other side of the couch and picked up a heavier weight. Yeah, they are. Azaria answered. You know, kids, even if you don't make it, I still think what you've accomplished is amazing." The twins' mother tried to make it better. "Uh-huh," Izuku responded. He went quiet again, and Azaria was also deep in thought. Izu must not have heard from All Might recently. His attitude has been in the gutter ever since the test, so he probably knows that he won't get in. But you never know. He might have a small chance. And Izuku's new quirk is crazy powerful. He was completely wiped from the exam after Recovery Girl healed him. She said that he broke both of his legs and his arm. One for All must have drawbacks that his body isn't ready for. And what would happen if he were to do a practice match? If he used his quirk, would he be useless? So he has to find a way to make it better. Somehow, he'll have to change his fighting style. Azaria, Izuku. The twins turned to see their mother on her knees with 2 letters in her hand. They came, they're here. Immediately Izuku locked himself in his room, making Azaria go to hers alone. She could hear their mother pacing outside their rooms, and she was a little scared herself to open the letter. She had actually wanted to open her letter with her brother, but he wanted to keep it all to himself, since it was his burden to bear, and he didn't want her to feel stress. Which sounded like a load of bull to her. Azaria fiddled with the envelope before sighing and opening it. Suddenly, a large screen appeared above her desk, and All Might was at the center of it. Young Azaria. The girl furrowed her eyebrows. All Might? The huge smile never left his face. Now, before you try to pepper me with questions and demand explanations, I'll let you know that your brother, young Izuku, has passed his exam. Azaria's hands went to her mouth, and she felt tears of happiness and excitement in her eyes. She felt a feeling of warmth and comfort spreading through her, and she almost couldn't wait to congratulate her twin. "That's amazing," she exclaimed, not able to contain herself. "And I would also like to congratulate you, young Azaria. You have passed the exam with a tie for the highest overall score." Azaria let out a carefree laugh. "And all the teachers were impressed by you, especially the principal. You seem to take care of others despite your amount of points. In the end, you got 77 points in all." Azaria furrowed her eyebrows again and was about to argue, but the pro hero knew exactly what she was going to say. "We don't just give out points for defeating robots, you know. Since you saved so many others and helped more along the way, you got 39 rescue points added to your 38 villain points already." Something flickered on the screen, and her score came up. Azaria Midoriya 38 villain points, 39 rescue points. You passed with flying colors, and I couldn't be more proud of you and your brother. It shows that you both will be amazing heroes. There was a pause, and All Might's smile changed from a happy one to a proud one. "Welcome to UA. Hi." Ryoshi lay down on the couch near the front door, his eyes closed. He remained laying down once again as he heard another car pass. He listened closely to the sounds of the road, keeping his ears strained for the mail truck. Its engine carried a distinct sound, he'd learned, and today was the day his decision letter from UA High would deliver. Another car passed, but the engine's sound wasn't loud enough. A truck then passed a couple minutes later, and it was too loud to be the mail truck. Minutes passed with nothing until Ryoshi's eyes snapped open as he listened. A medium-sized car was driving down the street, accompanied by the light squeak of its brakes every 10 seconds or so. That kind of intermittent braking, and that noise coming from the engine could only be. Ryoshi shot up from the couch almost instantly. His mother, who was in a different room, saw him out of the corner of her eye. "Oh," she exclaimed. "Is it here?" "I think so," Ryoshi said, swinging the front door open. "Oh, Rikishi, come quick," Sakido exclaimed as Ryoshi practically ran out to the mailbox. He practically flew down the driveway and barely stopped in time to not completely overshoot the mailbox. He pulled the hatch open, revealing a single envelope in the back of the box. Ryoshi reached in and grabbed it, pulling it out. There was writing on the top of the envelope. To Mr. Ryoshi Chisai. From UA High School Office of Admissions. Pressed down on the envelope's flap was the UA high school official seal, keeping the envelope closed. Ryoshi quickly shut the mailbox and ran back into his house, where his parents were waiting in the front room. "Come on, open it," Sakito said impatiently. "Yes," Rikishi said. "We can't wait to see what they sent." "Right," Ryoshi said, closing the front door. He sat down across from his parents, envelope in hand. He tore open the top, revealing a folded letter and a smaller holographic projector. On the outside of the paper, there was writing. "Please watch the hologram before reading the letter." Ryoshi put the letter aside and grabbed the small projector in the envelope. He set it on the floor and activated it. Ha 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 ha. A booming, deep, triumphant laugh came from the hologram as it projected. The image of All Might materialized in front of Ryoshi. He was standing in front of a large screen, likely to display results. All Might's fanfare began playing from the projector as he grinned. "Well, I'd say this is good news," Rikishi said. "They wouldn't get All Might to record a denial, would they?" "Young Chaisai," All Might bellowed. "I am here to evaluate your results on the practical exam. Buckle up." Ryoshi said nothing, but simply watched intently. All Might turned to the screen with a remote in his hand. He tapped a button, and captured video footage of Ryoshi during the practical exam began playing. "Wow, look at you go," Sakito exclaimed. "Can I just say, you gave us a phenomenal performance." All Might congratulated. "You dispatched nearly every robot you came across with ease and skill. Not to mention, I can almost see the gears turning in your head during your exam." Ryoshi's excitement slowly grew higher and higher as he watched. "Now, for your final score," All Might said, pushing another button on his remote. The screen scrolled away from the footage, revealing a screen with 3 numbers on it, representing Ryoshi's points. The first number, labeled Villain, was valued at 60 points. The second value, labeled Rescue, was valued at 15, and the final total point number was valued at 75 points. "Simply incredible," All Might exclaimed. "You show great skill in combat and obvious capability in rescue operations. You scored second place overall among all applicants. How could we possibly turn away one with such potential?" Both Ryoshi and his parents gasped in realization, as All Might extended his arm out to Ryoshi. "I'm honored to be the one to tell you. Welcome to UA. Hi," All Might proclaimed. A happy smile formed on Ryoshi's face. Admittedly a rarer sight considering how calculating he was. "Class starts next week, young Chaisai. Everything else you need to know is in the envelope. I'll see you at school." "Woo-hoo," Sakito yelled, running up and hugging Ryoshi. "We're so proud of you," Rikishi said. "Let's get some family over here for dinner." "Sounds like a plan," Sakito said happily. "I'll call my sisters." "I'll call my brother after I pick up Kenzo from the groomers," Rikishi said. "Sozo doesn't do much anyway. I'm sure he'll be available." I got in," Ryoshi said, standing up. "That's right, kid. But don't rest on your laurels just yet," Rikishi warned. "You'll be using that big brain of yours even more here on out." "Yeah," Ryoshi agreed. He would be pushing himself a lot more. Both his mind and his quirk. Ryoshi shuddered. Why did he suddenly feel so uneasy? 1A. Ricky made his way down one of the hallways at UA High, looking for his classroom, room 1A. He found his room and opened the door, only to be greeted by a blast of conversations and introductions left and right. He spotted several familiar faces, including the green-haired kids, the glasses boy, the spiky kid, and, wait. There was another student leaning in the corner, eyeing the green-haired siblings. Was that the other kid he'd met during the sludge villain incident? Man, everyone was here. He'd definitely have to introduce himself and actually get his name. But first, Ricky looked over to a small argument to the side of the room. The glasses boy had been making his rounds by introducing himself to everyone in the class, though he seemed to be stuck on the spiky kid, who was currently insulting his middle school. "Hey, Spiky, cool your jets. Heroes don't bully," Ricky said. The spiky kid froze, then turned to look at Ricky. He quickly looked Ricky up and down before shooting back. "What did you call me, Radio Shack?" the kid yelled. Spiky? What, did those explosions make you deaf?" The spiky kid glared daggers at Ricky, obviously flabbergasted that anyone would dare talk back to him. "Listen up, you stupid extra," Spiky said. "The name's Katsuki Bakugo, and don't you dare forget it." "Oh, really? Why not?" Ricky shot back. The glasses boy looked uncomfortably at Bakugo. "You want to fight, Radio Shack?" Bakugo growled. "Come on, come at me." "Nah," Ricky said, sitting down at his desk. Bakugo stomped over to Ricky's desk and slammed his hand down on the surface, causing a small explosion that left a burn mark in the shape of Bakugo's hand. "What's wrong, plug and play?" Bakugo snarled. "You scared of me?" "No," Ricky said calmly. "Just smarter than you." Bakugo suddenly grabbed Ricky by his necktie and pulled him up out of his seat. "You think you're better than me?" Bakugo said angrily. "We'll see about that." "Like I said," Ricky countered, "no." Ricky tapped the side of Bakugo's head with his finger, causing a small shock to jump over from his finger. Nothing harmful, but definitely painful. "Gah!" Bakugo yelled. "Why, you little, I swear I'm gonna." Suddenly, a gray cloth of some kind wrapped around Bakugo's arm, causing him to let go of Ricky. It pulled his arm back, forcing him to stumble away from Ricky's desk. What the hell?" Bakugo exclaimed, straining his head to see what wrapped his arm up. Ricky looked over at the door, but saw nothing. "If you're here to pick fights," started a low voice from near the door, "then get out. This is the hero course." Ricky finally noticed a yellow sleeping bag right outside the doorway. An older man was poking out of it, his shoulder-length black hair sticking up and his tired-looking eyes glowing red. A juice box was sticking out of his mouth, which he immediately finished. The strange gray cloth was also coming out of the bag. "It took you 8 seconds to quiet down. On top of that, the two of you were picking a fight," he said, looking between Ricky and Bakugo. "Time is a precious resource. You lot aren't very rational, are you?" The man stood up, shedding his sleeping bag. "I'm your homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa. Pleased to meet you, and all that stuff. Quickly now. Change into your gym clothes and head out to the grounds. I'll meet you there." Ricky quickly began heading for the door, but that same gray cloth caught his arm. "Not so fast." Ricky looked back to Mr. Aizawa, who still had Bakugo's arm wrapped up. "Normally I'd send you to the principal for fighting like that," Aizawa began. "But since it's the first day of school, I'll let you talk it out. And you're not leaving this classroom until you do." But Mr. Aizawa," Ricky started. "You didn't start it? I know. I still want you two to bury the hatchet regardless," Aizawa said. "Grah," Bakugo growled. "This is a stupid waste of time." "I agree," Aizawa said. "Maybe you'd like to hurry it up." Ricky decided to end the awkward suffering. "Listen, Bakugo. At least you're not completely spineless, Radio Shack," Bakugo said. He glared back at Aizawa. "Good enough for me. Get your gym clothes on and join your classmates," Aizawa ordered. "Quickly." Ricky grabbed his gym clothes and his backpack, just in case. He went to the locker room to change and soon, he was walking out into the bright morning to join his classmates. Ricky made it to them, and Aizawa started talking. "Today, I'll be conducting a test of your quirks," he said, pausing to let it sink in. "What about the entrance ceremony?" a brown-haired girl asked. "Or the guidance sessions?" "No time to waste on that stuff if you want to become heroes," Aizawa responded. The brunette looked at him in disbelief, but didn't say anything else, so Aizawa continued. "UA is known for its freestyle education system. That applies to us teachers as well." The students just looked at him, trying to figure out what he was trying to say. Softball throwing, the standing long jump, the 50-meter dash, endurance running, grip strength, side-to-side stepping, upper body training, And the seated toe touch. You all did these in middle school, yes. Your standard no quirks allowed gym tests, Aizawa said. A few of the kids nodded. This country still insists on prohibiting quirks when calculating the averages of those tests. It's not rational, Aizawa insisted. The Department of Education is just procrastinating at this point. Aizawa turned to Bakugo. Bakugo, Midoriya, you two tied for first place in the entrance exam. How far could you throw in middle school? 67 meters, I think, Bakugo answered proudly. 41 meters, the green-haired girl, Izaria, grumbled. Great. Now try it with your quirk, Aizawa requested, tossing Bakugo and Izaria a softball each. Anything goes, just don't leave the circle. Give it all you've got. Awesome, Bakugo said dryly. He reared back, putting himself into a pitching stance. He flung his arm forward, and an earth-shattering boom rang across the courtyard. Die, Bakugo yelled. An explosion erupted from Bakugo's palm, and the ball shot up into the air, leaving a smoke trail. Ricky had to shield his eyes from the resulting wind. A few people yelped in surprise, while others just stared slack-jawed. A beep came from an electronic pad in Aizawa's hands, and he held it up to Bakugo and the rest of the class. 705.2 meters, it read on the pad. Izaria, your turn, Aizawa said. There's no way she can match that. You never know, she got first place too. You got this, Area, said the green-haired boy. They must be related. You said I can do anything but leave the circle, right? Izaria asked. That's what I said, Aizawa answered. Izaria nodded and held up the ball, which was floating in her palm. What looked like droplets of water swirled around the ball, and Izaria grabbed it and flung her arm forward, water exploding from her hand, launching the ball as far as Bakugo did. Steam rose up from her fingertips and Ricky could see goosebumps starting to form on her arm. Aizawa's machine beeped, and he showed the results to the rest of the class. 705 meters exactly. Just behind Bakugo. Ricky noted. It's important for us to know your limits, Aizawa said. That's the first rational step to figuring out what kind of heroes you'll be. I wasn't expecting a quirk test right off the bat, Ricky thought. But I should be fine with the gym stuff, especially since we get to use our quirks. I always used to score low on those. 705 meters? Seriously? Whoa, this is awesome. So we can use our quirks for real. Man, the hero course is great. Aizawa looked up from his pad. Awesome, you say? The students who were talking immediately quieted down. UA has 3 years to mold you all into heroes. And you think it'll be all fun and games? Aizawa continued. The formerly excited students now looked sheepish and nervous. He sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose. Oh right. The one with the lowest score across all 8 events will be judged hopeless, and will be expelled. Ricky's head shot up at the word expelled. Expelled? Surely Aizawa wouldn't go that far, would he? What? Said the voice of everyone in the class, except Bakugo. Ricky heard a gasp, and he turned behind to see the green-haired kid with a ghastly expression on his face. I wonder what he's worried about, Ricky thought sarcastically. Nevertheless, I'll have to introduce myself to him later. Your fates are in our hands. Welcome to the UA High Hero course, Aizawa announced with a slightly sadistic expression. The lowest scorer will be expelled. The glasses boy wondered aloud. It's only the first day, the brunette girl remarked. I mean, even if I weren't, that's totally unfair. Aizawa glanced at the girl. Natural disasters, highway pileups, rampaging villains. Calamity is always right around the corner. I'd say Japan is full of unfair things. Heroes are the ones who correct all that unfairness. If you were hoping to spend your evenings messing around and being lazy, I'm sorry to tell you that for the next 3 years, UA will ring you out. That is plus ultra, Aizawa finished with an unsettling smile. Now line up for the 50-meter. Mukitsu Ida, you're up first. Ricky began walking up to the track, along with the glasses boy. So Ida's his name, huh? Ricky thought. Where have I heard that before? Ricky reached behind and unzipped his backpack, revealing the assorted tech inside. When he was crouched down, he caught a glimpse of Ida's legs. Are those, engines? Then this must be his brother. Ricky pushed the thought away and decided that he could use some turbines of his own. Ricky was in the middle of forming some turbines around his own legs when Aizawa blew the whistle. Ida took off like a rocket, and Ricky frantically finished putting on the turbines, noting that they were on backwards. He mentally shrugged and turned around, activating the turbines. He was a sight to behold, frantically running backwards, desperately trying to keep up with his own rockets. Ricky crossed the finish line at 387 seconds, not even a whole second behind Ida. Ida eyed Ricky's legs curiously as the turbines fell off, and Ricky shrugged. That wasn't supposed to happen, but I guess it worked out, he said. Ricky decided to start on a good note with Ida. Ida, right? Kaguriki Mukitsu. But you can just call me Ricky. Ricky extended his arm for a handshake, which Ida took. Tenya Ida, Ida said, shaking Ricky's arm. I've been meaning to tell you, I respect how you stood up to Bakugo back in the classroom. Not everyone has that kind of mental fortitude. He and Ricky began walking back to the rest of the class. Ah, he's just a bully, Ricky dismissed, remembering Meko. They're not hard to figure out, at least in my experience. Ida smiled. In any case, I appreciate it. By the way, what exactly is your quirk? He asked, glancing at the turbines on the ground. Ricky grinned and extended his antenna. It's called Technopath, Ricky answered. It lets me move technology with my mind, and I can also power it with an electric current that goes through my body. My antenna also lets me pick up radio stations. Ricky tuned to a station and opened his mouth. Life is a Highway by Tom Cochrane played from his vocal cords. Ida gave a light chuckle. That certainly is interesting, he remarked. My quirk is engine. The engines on my legs can propel me forward. Engine, huh? Ricky wondered. He decided to at least get confirmation. Are you related to Ingenium? Ida laughed. To be honest, I was wondering when someone would ask me that. Yes, he's my older brother. I hope to be as good a hero as him someday. So he is related. He might find my name familiar. If he knew, he'd make sure he kept his distance, no doubt. Hey, you're pretty lucky having a pro hero for a brother, Ricky encouraged Ida, shaking off the thought. Someone you can get advice from, and all that? I didn't have that luxury. Ricky's scarred finger twitched reflexively. Ida raised an eyebrow, but didn't say anything. Ricky, called a girl from behind them. Ricky turned to see none other than Budenoki walking towards him. The brunette girl was with her, and gave Ricky a warm smile. Hey, Budenoki, what's up? He asked. Ida greeted them with a wave and began introducing himself to the brunette. I'm pretty good, Budenoki replied. I just barely beat Uraraka in the 50-meter, did you see? But it's okay, because now we're friends. She gestured to the brunette girl, Uraraka. That's great, Ricky said. By the way, have you seen Tetsutetsu yet? Budenoki frowned. No, I think he's in a different class. Bummer, huh? But it's okay, there's a bunch of other kids. You four, Aizawa said, pointing at them. Stop talking and line up for the next event. I don't have all day. As the period progressed, Ricky got through the bulk of the events using his quirk in various ways. He used a mechanical brace on his hand for the grip strength test, a pair of burst rockets for the standing long jump, and a pair of motorized wheels turned sideways for the sidestepping. Then came the softball throw, where Ricky was the third to last student up to the circle. Mukitsu, you're up. Aizawa tossed Ricky a softball. Ricky didn't know how he was going to top Uraraka's infinite throw right before him, but he might as well try something. Ricky stepped into the circle and tossed the ball up and down in his hand. He extended his antenna for maximum range and floated a pair of thrusters from his backpack. Aizawa eyed the equipment, but said nothing. Ricky grabbed a few more connective pieces from his bag and attached the thrusters to the ball. He drew his arm back and chucked the ball as hard as he could. Just before it hit the ground, he activated the thrusters on the ball and it rocketed up and forward, higher and farther, until it was out of Ricky's effective range and fell to the ground. He turned back to Mr. Aizawa. "How'd I do, Teach?" he asked. Aizawa raised an eyebrow. "That's Mr. Aizawa, or Sir to you." He showed the pad to Ricky and the rest of the class, who gasped in awe and admiration. 617 meters, it read. 4th place in the softball throw. "Not bad," Aizawa commented. "Chisai, your turn." From further in the student crowd, that same boy Ricky met during the sludge incident stepped out. Aizawa tossed him the ball, and he walked into the circle. Chisai looked out into the distance with a calculating gaze. He wound his arm back as if to pitch it normally, but at the last second of his throw, both his hand and the ball lit up with a bright purple aura. He finished his throw and the ball left his hand, but it didn't rise into the air that much. Instead, it kept an almost perfectly straight path forward through the air as it accelerated. Faster and faster the ball went, all while Chisai kept his stance with his arm out. Nearly 2 minutes passed, and about 10 seconds after the ball seemingly disappeared into the horizon, the glowing on Chisai's hand stopped, and he dropped his arm to his side. Chisai stepped out of the circle, and Aizawa's machine beeped. Aizawa glanced at it for a bit, before showing it to the rest of the class. "For 2 kilometers, the machine's voice said. "Holy crap. That blows nearly everyone else's scores way out of the water. Don't forget about that girl who got infinity. No way anyone's beating that." "Settle down," Aizawa said sternly. He turned to Chisai. "Well done." "Thanks," Chisai said, walking back in the crowd, stopping near Bakugo. "Now then," Aizawa said. "Midoriya, your turn." Both Azaria and the green-haired boy looked up at Aizawa, who sighed. "Izuku Midoriya. Brother and sister, huh?" Ricky thought. The green-haired boy, who Ricky now knew as Izuku, stepped up to the circle nervously. Ricky gave him a quick thumbs up and stood next to Ida and Uraraka, who were watching Izuku intently. "Hey, what's his quirk?" Ricky asked. Ida glanced at Ricky, then back toward Izuku. "I'm not sure," Ida answered. "But I do know it's powerful. All I've seen him do is get from the ground to the top of the 0-point villain with a single jump, and then he destroyed it with a single punch. But the punch broke his arm, and I think the jump broke his legs too. So he can't control his quirk very well, huh?" Ricky thought. "I know the feeling." "Regardless, Midoriya isn't doing very well," Ida finished. "Well duh," Bakugo interjected. "He's a quirkless runt." "Quirkless? He has a quirk. Haven't you heard of his feats in the entrance exam?" Ida rebutted. "Wait, he told you he was quirkless too?" Chisai asked suddenly. "Huh?" Bakugo said. "No, I've always known he was powerless. What are you two?" "Quiet," Aizawa said sternly. He nodded at Izuku. Izuku gulped and clenched the ball tightly. He drew back, and what looked like energy seemed to be coursing through the veins on his arm. He took a deep breath and threw the ball, which landed pathetically about 40 meters away. Izuku stared at the softball, mortified. But I was trying to." "I erased your quirk," Aizawa explained. His hair stood on end, and his eyes glowed red. "That ridiculous entrance exam. Completely irrational when you consider that someone like you got in." Izuku turned to Aizawa, shocked and silent. "I saw it. How you can't control your quirk. If you used that in a fight, you'd only be good for one punch. Are you expecting someone to step in to help?" Aizawa accused. "And no, it's not like that, ugh." Aizawa yanked Izuku closer with his scarf. "Whatever you were planning, it would have inconvenienced those around you," Aizawa said. "Way back when, a certain hot-blooded hero saved over 1,000 people during a disaster. He made himself a legend. You've got the same reckless streak, but you're totally useless after saving just a single person. You cannot become a hero with that power of yours." Izuku winced at that last part, to which Aizawa sighed. His eyes went back to normal, and his hair fell back down. "You've got your quirk back. Give it another go," he ordered. "Let's get this over with." Izuku grabbed the ball, looking dejected. He stepped back into the circle, muttering to himself. "Are you worried about him?" asked a smooth voice next to Ricky. He turned to see a blonde boy next to Uraraka, with his hand on her shoulder. He looked sparkly somehow. "I'm not worried at all." Uraraka simply stared at him with a flabbergasted expression. "Seems like he received some sort of special instruction," Ida said to Ricky. Ricky opened his mouth to speak, but was cut off. "Yeah, the instruction to leave this school," Bakugo cut in. Ricky saw the green-haired girl deliver a harsh glare to Bakugo, and he felt a chill. Ricky made a mental note. Never get on her bad side. But why was everyone doubting this kid? He didn't seem like much, but he charged the sludge villain. Much of the class must have not seen that. "Come on, Bakugo, have faith," Ricky chided. "Chin up there, Midoriya, you got this." Bakugo just glared at Ricky. The green-haired girl, Izuku's sister, stepped up next to Ricky. "Yeah, Izu," she called. "Knock it out of the park." "Shut up," Aizawa snapped. He nodded back at Izuku to continue. Izuku gave them an uncertain smile and turned back to the circle. He held the ball in his hand, muttering to himself for a moment. He stepped forward and winded his arm back, preparing for the throw. Still muttering to himself, he flung his arm forward, and for a moment it looked like he had given up. At the last possible second, right before the ball left his fingertip, his finger lit up like the night sky, coursing with energy. The ball shot up and away with a shock wave that blew Aizawa and the class back a few steps. Bakugo stared up at the ball in disbelief, speechless. Izuku's finger was bruised all the way across, and it was bleeding. He had clearly broken it badly. However, he would still be able to fight in this situation. "Yes, you did it." His sister laughed, running up to her brother and giving him a huge hug. Aizawa, eyes wide, checked how far the ball went, showing it to Izuku and the class. 705 meters, it read. "Mr. Aizawa," Izuku said, clenching his fist. "I can still move." "Woo," Uraraka called. "Now that's a hero-like record if I ever saw one." "That's the way, Midoriya," Ricky called, clapping. "His finger appears to be swollen," Ida observed. Thinking back to the entrance exam, what a strange quirk. "HM," the sparkly kid said. "Stylishly done." Bakugo just gaped at the scene, still processing what he had just witnessed. His face grew less surprised and more angry with each passing second. "What the hell? Explain yourself, Deku," Bakugo yelled from the crowd of students. He flew forward with immense speed, hand outstretched and sparking. "You've been lying to me this whole time." Izaria lunged forward in front of Bakugo to stop him and spread out her arms, perhaps to use her power. But her balance was off and Bakugo shoved her out of the way and continued forward. Suddenly Bakugo jerked backward, tangled in that familiar gray cloth. Mr. Aizawa looked at him with a stern expression, eyes red and hair up. "We do not attack fellow students. I thought you had already learned that lesson." "Let go of me," the hothead mumbled. The teacher sighed and let his scarf go, then turned to Izaria, who had just gotten up from being shoved to the ground. He just stared at her, and she stared back in response. Ricky could see Izaria popping her knuckles behind her back. "HM. Might be a nervous habit. We're already behind schedule," Aizawa said monotonously, finally looking away. "Line up for endurance running." Ryoshi huffed and puffed as his heart pounded and sweat rolled down his face. He wouldn't call himself out of shape, but he definitely wasn't used to running for that long. He certainly wasn't dead last, though. After a few students came through after him, Izuku Midoriya made his way across the finish line, ranking somewhere in the middle. He winced audibly as his arms went up and down from the running, obviously aggravating his broken finger. Ryoshi's eyes lingered on Midoriya as he walked back to Aizawa, thinking hard. Maybe he didn't use it then because it breaks his body when he does, Ryoshi thought. But then, why would he say he's quirkless? Did he think it would be easier to explain? His quirk seems remarkably simple. Super strength. Nothing complex about it. He couldn't have manifested a quirk within 10 months, could he? No, the doctors say quirks never manifest past age 4 at the latest. He must have lied. But why? Ryoshi decided to ask one of the students in front of him, the blonde one. Bakugo, he called. Huh? Bakugo said roughly, turning back to face Ryoshi. Who are you? Ryoshi Chaisai, Ryoshi said calmly. What do you know about Izuku Midoriya's quirk? Bakugo recoiled just a bit, but quickly recovered. Why the hell do you care? Bakugo asked angrily. I met him before this, almost a year ago, during the sludge incident, Ryoshi explained. He told me he was quirkless. Bakugo eyed Ryoshi over for a few seconds before responding. TCH, he scoffed. Yeah, I remember you. He said he was quirkless because he was. I've known that weakling since we were little kids, and he's always been powerless. I don't know what the hell's going on, but I swear I'm gonna get to the bottom of it. Got that? With that, Bakugo stormed off ahead. Ryoshi thought. Could he really have just recently manifested a quirk? I find it unlikely that he not only lied to me, but also to Bakugo for his entire life. Maybe he thought he was quirkless. Hey, Chaisai, right? Ryoshi turned around to see who had called his name. That boy with the antenna, the one who had stood up to Bakugo in the classroom, was jogging over to him. Ryoshi also recognized him from the sludge incident, though not by name. A radio antenna poking out of one's back was difficult to overlook. Name's Koguriki Mukitsu, Mukitsu said. But you can just call me Ricky. Ryoshi shook his hand, noting his happy demeanor. Different from the more reserved person he met during the incident, but a lot could change in 10 months. Plus, those were extreme circumstances. Yeah, me too, Ricky said. That was some day, huh? Anyway, it's nice to actually learn your name after all that. Likewise, Ryoshi said as they walked. Any first thoughts? Ricky asked. What are you thinking about the class so far? Ryoshi thought back to the earlier events of the day. That girl? The one who threw the ball the farthest, Ryoshi began. Her name was Uraraka, if I recall correctly. Yeah, I remember her, Ricky said. Ryoshi continued. I think I saw her at the entrance exam as well. Her quirk? It's interesting. It seems like she can nullify gravity's effect on objects she touches. I wonder if she has a limit. Yeah, a bunch of cool quirks all around, Ricky said. Like Izuku Midoriya's and Bakugo's too, I wonder. Get moving, it's time for the results, Aizawa said. Oop, Ricky exclaimed. Time to go. He and Ryoshi caught up to the crowd where Aizawa was waiting in front of a screen. Time to see which one of you fell too far behind, Aizawa said unsettlingly. He pointed his remote at the screen and pushed a button. All the students' names scrolled up onto the screen, along with their pictures and scores. First place, Momo Yaoyorozu. Second place, Shoto Todoroki. Third place, Katsuki Bakugo. Fourth place, Ryoshi Chaisai. Fifth place, Tenya Ida. Sixth place, Koguriki Mukitsu. Seventh place, Izaria Midoriya. Eighth place, Fumikage Tokoyami. Ninth place, Mizo Shoji. 10th place, Mashiro Ujira. 11th place, Keiko Budanoki. 12th place, Ijiro Kirishima. 13th place, Mina Ashido. 14th place, Ochako Uraraka. 15th place, Koji Koda. 16th place, Rikido Sato. 17th place, Tsuyu Asui. 18th place, Yuga Ayama. 19th place, Hanta Siro. 20th place, Denki Kaminari. 21st place, Kyoka Jiro. 22nd place, Toru Hagakure. 23rd place, Minoru Mainta. 24th place, Izuku Midoriya. Aizawa looked up at the crowd of students and began drawing a breath, and the entire class stood on edge. The events were over, and the results were announced. Izuku Midoriya was about to be. Anna and I lied, Aizawa revealed. No one's getting expelled. Silence dropped over the group like a hammer. Ida, Uraraka, and Izuku stared at their teacher in disbelief. Aizawa chuckled unsettlingly. That was a rational deception, he started, meant to bring out the best in all of you. What Aizawa had said finally processed with the rest of the class. What? Yelled most of the class, especially Izuku. Well, of course it was a lie, a girl with a large ponytail pointed out. Didn't take much to figure that out. Anyway, we're done here, Aizawa said, turning around. Your documents about the curriculum and such are back in the classroom. Give them a look. And Midoriya, have Recovery Girl fix you up. Tomorrow's trials aren't going to be any easier. Chapter 7. Deku's Fine. Summary. We get to meet everyone. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. After Monday's quirk tests, Budenoki had taken Ricky all across the cafeteria, introducing him to all his classmates, a couple of whom he already knew from middle school. Oh hey, I remember you, Mina Ashido recalled. You were the boy who always talked in hexadecimal, right? Binary, Ricky corrected her, sheepishly. Oh, my mistake, she apologized. It's good to see you, though. Ricky replied in kind and kept moving across the table. You can speak binary, Budenoki asked. Well, miles and ones one 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 ones one one e one ones one 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 oh ones one one ones one as a one one oh one one oh ones one one ones one 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 oh 1001 101 oh ones one 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 oh one ones one one dot 101 z 101 110. Ricky replied, which made Budenoki giggled. Further across the table, a red-haired boy popped up amongst the other students. He saw Ricky, and a toothy grin stretched across his face, showing off some very familiar pointed teeth. Ricky, there you are, Kirishima exclaimed. Kirishima, Ricky yelled back, ecstatic to see his middle school friend. I thought I recognized those teeth. And I knew I recognized that techno babble. Kirishima rose out of his seat and gave Ricky a bro hug. Dude, there are so many more people here than in middle school, Ricky exclaimed, gesturing to everyone around them. Also, nice hair. Yeah, Kirishima said, not elaborating further. Come on, you gotta meet these guys. Ricky caught the message and nodded. This guy here is Kaminari, Kirishima pointed out, directing Ricky around the lunch table. The boy with bright yellow hair and a black lightning bolt down one part smiled and waved. He's Sparky. Kirishima led him to another guy who had black hair that matted his forehead. And this guy is... I'm Zero. I can shoot tape from my elbows, he explained, showing his elbows off as an example. Ricky leaned forward and examined his arms with curiosity. How does that exactly work? Kirishima yanked him to another person before Zero could respond. And this guy is Bakugo. Kirishima tried to pat him on the shoulder, but Bakugo practically hissed out not to touch him. Ricky laughed nervously and scratched the back of his head. Yeah, we've met. And this girl here is Gyro. Hey, I heard you were the tech guy. How does that work? A girl with short, shining dark purple hair and long plugs attached to her earlobes looked up at him. Her eyes looked perpetually disinterested, and that made them all the more beautiful. Ricky's antennae reflexively shot up as his heart skipped a beat, then rapidly sped up. He heard what she'd said, but for some reason couldn't process it. Hello? She asked. Oh, he gets like this sometimes, Kirishima explained. You just gotta give him a little shove. Kirishima forced Ricky's antenna back down with a grunt. Ricky blinked and shook his head, trying to focus back. Huh, sorry about that, he said sheepishly. My antenna lets me move tech with my mind. I can also pick up radio stations. He extended his antenna and opened his mouth wide. You have to go and make things so complicated? I see the way. He stopped the song by closing his mouth. Oh, that's pretty cool, Gyro said, her eyes lighting up with interest and a hint of embarrassment, which was a surprise since Gyro typically looked bored. Kirishima chuckled and pulled Ricky aside. Dude, what was that? That only happens when you're totally spaced out, he exclaimed. Ricky's face grew nearly as red as Kirishima's hair as he stared at the floor. She's hella cool, dude. Kirishima's eyes widened as he looked back and forth across Gyro and Ricky. Come on, man. It's the first day. Focus on getting through that. Worry about crushes later. Ricky shook himself and stood back up straight. Right, he said. Thanks for the reboot. Hey, no problem. Kirishima gave a thumbs up. Oh, Ricky, come here. It's Uraraka. Budenoki grabbed Ricky's arm and pulled him away, almost yanking his arm out of his socket. Ricky gave a friendly goodbye wave to the other students and followed Budenoki to where Ida Izuku's sister, and Uraraka were sitting. Hey there, Uraraka greeted the two of them. Welcome, Ida said, making room for the two of them. You guys all know who Ricky is, I'm assuming? Budenoki asked, sitting down and gesturing to Ricky. Ricky extended his hand to the Midoriya twins as he sat down to introduce himself, formally. Name's Koguriki Mukitsu, he said. But you can just call him Ricky, Budenoki finished. Yeah, what she said? Ricky chuckled. Izuku and his sister shook Ricky's hand. I'm Izuku Midoriya, Izuku said, smiling. And I wanted to thank you for cheering for me earlier today. Hey, it's no trouble, Ricky said. Quite a throw you've got there, by the way. Yeah, Izuku responded. Problem is, I can't quite control it yet. And I'm Azaria Midoriya, his sister said. A pleasure, Ricky said. You've got a pretty good throw too. What was that about? Well, I can control water, Azaria said, swirling a few droplets around her fingers. When I threw the ball, I shot some water straight into it, sending it flying. That's so cool, Budenoki exclaimed. How do you? The bell rang, marking the end of lunch. No time to waste, Ida said. We wouldn't want to be late to a class on the first day, would we? Ricky and the others headed over to the next class, English with present Mike. That went by fast, and so did the last class of the day, and before he knew it, Ricky was on his way home. Walking my way? Someone said behind him. Ricky turned around to see Gyro walking up to him, fidgeting with her earphone jacks somewhat nervously. Oh, Ricky said, trying to keep his composure. Hey, yeah, just on my way to the train station. Sweet, Gyro said. Me too. She began walking in pace with Ricky. A lot of crazy quirks today, huh? Ricky said, trying to make conversation. Yeah, Gyro replied. And actually, I thought yours was really cool too. Ricky's antenna suddenly shot up as he felt a warmth rise up to his face. He glared up at his antenna as he sent it back down quickly. Thanks, he said. Yours too. You're the only other person I've met besides my mom that has technology attached to them as part of their power. I wonder how similar your ear jacks are to my antenna. Thanks, Gyro said somewhat quietly. As they continued walking to the train station, Gyro looked over at Ricky. So, what kind of music do you like? You look awful, Azaria laughed at her brother, snickering behind her hand. Hey, you don't look much better, he laughed back. They had finished the school day already, and both were equally exhausted. In Recovery Girl's office, she had explained her quirk and how she really should only use it when people have energy, due to it draining your stamina. How's your finger? Both siblings jumped and looked back to see Ida, who appeared out of nowhere. Ida, it's fine, thanks to Recovery Girl, Izuku said, holding it up and squinting at it like it could change at any time. She can really work wonders, Azaria commented. But Mr. Azawa sure fooled us. He made me think, this is how it is at the top. But our own instructor deceived us like that. Azaria glanced at Ida and smiled a little. He's not actually mean and scary. He's just super serious. Hey, you three. Azaria turned to see Uraraka skipping over to them. Are you headed to the station? Wait up. Ah, Infinity Girl, Ida observed. The green-haired girl raised an eyebrow. He's clearly not good with names. Uraraka giggled and placed a hand on her chest. I'm Ochako Uraraka. You're Tenya, Ida, Azaria, and Midoriya. Deku, right? Deku? Azaria saw Izuku stiffen, and she herself winced. That nickname was a cruel reminder that Izuku was quirkless or useless in Bakugo's eyes. For years Azaria had tried to get everyone in her class, including Bakugo himself, to try and stop. And for years she failed. During the test, that Bakugo guy said, "Damn you, Deku, right?" Uraraka pointed out. Izuku fumbled to explain, but Azaria was there to save the day. She sighed. Deku was a name that Bakugo made for him when we were kids. It is a combination of defenseless Izuku. A derogatory pet name then? Ida mumbled, rubbing his chin. Oh gotcha, sorry. Uraraka scratched the back of her head. But, Deku, well, it just screams. Do your best, I kinda like it. Did you not hear a thing I just said? Izuku's eyes went wide and face was bright red. Deku's fine. Midoriya, Ida exclaimed. Show a bit of backbone. It's an insult, isn't it? Azaria looked at her brother with a little hurt in her eyes. Were all of her efforts for nothing? Years and years she had tried, but now it seemed to be in vain. But she said nothing as the conversation carried on, but walked a few steps behind the others, eventually getting lost in her own thoughts. Hey! A voice called from behind them. Izuku Midoriya. Azaria turned around to see Ryoshi Chaisai, the boy that had been at the sludge incident, jogging to catch up to them. Oh hey Chaisai, Izuku said, unsure. What's up? I just wanted to ask you something, and I saw you on my way to the bus, Chaisai said. Huh? Izuku said. What is it? You told me you were quirkless, back right after the sludge incident, Chaisai said. But you're obviously not. Chaisai glanced at Izuku's bandaged finger. Crap, Azaria thought. Izuku told him before he got one for all. I gotta say something. Azaria opened her mouth to respond, but Izuku started talking first. Oh yeah, Izuku said. He sounded relieved for some reason. It's a funny story, actually. Turns out I thought I was quirkless, because the doctors said I wouldn't manifest, and I didn't for the longest time, until about 6 months ago. I manifested a new quirk that I guess hadn't shown itself until then. Dang Azaria thought. That was a solid explanation, and he had obviously rehearsed it. He was serious about keeping All Might's power under wraps. I see, Chaisai said, somewhat hesitantly. That's what I was wondering. You manifested a mere 6 months ago? Ida said incredulously. That's unheard of. No wonder you seem to have trouble controlling your power. Yeah, that must be super rare, Uraraka said. But it's an awesome power, that's for sure. Yes, Chaisai said. Even after that, he didn't seem completely convinced. Do you mind if I walk with you for? Not at all, Ida said. Nope, Uraraka said. Join the club. I don't mind, Izuku said. Azaria just shrugged, and Ryoshi joined them and started a conversation with Uraraka about her quirk. She sighed, slightly relieved. All Might's secret was still safe. Chapter 8. Deku vs Kaken. Summary. Battle Training. Notes. We're finally getting into the major plot. I'm excited for now the story is playing out, and I hope you are too. Let me know what you think in the comment. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. I am here. A deep, heroic voice bellowed. Coming through the door like a hero, All Might strode into the classroom, his blue cape flowing behind his red and white Silver Age costume. It's All Might. Incredible. He's really gonna teach us. That's his Silver Age costume. Hero basic training, All Might boomed. The class that'll put you through all sorts of special training to mold you into heroes. The entire class was buzzing with excitement. This is what they'd been waiting for. And getting to train with All Might, who was the #1 hero, made it even better. No time to dally. Today's activity is this. All Might held up a card that said battle on it in a flashy font. Battle training, murmurs broke out among the students. Some students, Bakugo especially, looked excited. Others neutral, and some unsure. Now, settle down, All Might chided. For battle training, you're gonna need these. All Might grabbed a remote off of his desk and pointed it at the wall, clicking it. 5 rows of cubbies, labeled 1 through 24, extended out of the wall. In accordance with the quirk registry and the special request forms you filled out before being admitted. Costumes. The whole class erupted in cheers as the students flocked over to the cubbies. Costumes, Izuku exclaimed, hugging his bag. Ricky found cubby number 22 and grabbed his bag out of it. After you change, come out in ranking order to ground beta, All Might said. Unzipping his bag, Ricky was happy to see that they had honored his steep requests for his costume, which he quickly slipped into. At a glance, it seemed like a white leather jumpsuit with deep pockets along the hips and large pouches on the arms, legs, and back. Also inside the package was a pair of black combat boots, a pair of what seemed to be protective glasses with red lenses, and 2 gloves, one white, the other red. Nothing special at a glance. But the jumpsuit was actually a sophisticated tech suit with multiple metal points of contact along the inside, allowing Ricky to efficiently control the technology within. It read his pulse, blood pressure, and vitals, all showing on the heads-up display on the glasses. It also had a motorized movement option that interfaced directly with his brain via his antenna, which would enhance his physical strength if need be. What seemed like leather was actually a complex layering of insulators and conductors, so he could power his technology without having it make direct contact with his skin. The insulators also protected him and the suit from potential electric discharge. The pouches and pockets had motorized zippers, and they held assorted technology that Ricky could use. The suit also had a black detailing on the surface, designed to resemble a motherboard. The gloves were made of the same material as the jumpsuit. The right glove was black, and the left glove was colored red as a kind of homage to the incident that drove him to become a hero in the first place. The boots were mostly normal, with black leather coverings and thick rubber soles, but embedded inside were turbines that Ricky could use to clear long distances with ease or make a hasty escape. Looking good is very important, ladies and gentlemen, All Might said. The suit booted up and began displaying on the glasses. Look alive now, because from today on, All Might started. You're all heroes. Ricky followed the rest of the students out to ground beta. Ricky, that costume is so cool. Budenoki was running up behind him. Her costume had a lot of green. She had a green top that was circled in white floral and leaf patterns, and a knee-length skirt that looked like it was made of vines. She had a mask on that looked as if someone had placed leaves over her face and cut eye holes out of them. Thanks, he replied. So does yours. A loud clunking noise made Ricky and Budenoki turn around, a little startled. Izaria? Budenoki asked, staring in disbelief. Yeah, it's me. They went a little overkill with making my costume. She was wearing an ocean blue-colored jumpsuit that faded into white at the forearms and calves. Little droplet designs that were more blue than green covered her whole body. There were also small patches of the jumpsuit that were missing, but water within her suit flowed over them. But the thing that surprised everyone was the white helmet placed on her head. It covered her eyes and nose, but left an opening where her mouth was. She tugged it off her head and gave a tired look. It's kinda hard to move around with. Plus, the mouthpiece moves in when I start fighting, and then the lens fogs up. So I might have to fix it later. Hey, Ricky said, looking ahead. Who's that in the cloak? The boy in the cloak turned around, revealing Ryoshi Chisai clad in his hero costume. Whoa, Budenoki remarked, looking his costume over. Chisai was wearing an open black cloak that went down to his ankles. On his hands were a pair of black gloves with a purple spike pattern on the bottom side of them. Under the cloak was a gray shirt with a jutting out black pattern that went down to just above his belt, which was entirely black save for a purple stylized M on the buckle. Under the belt was a pair of gray pants, which ended with a pair of black combat boots, with the same purple spike pattern that was on the underside of the gloves. That's pretty sweet, Ricky complimented. Looks stealthy, Azaria said. That was the idea, Ryoshi said. I think the fabricators did a good job in balancing the black and the purple accents. A fellow friend of the dark, I see, said someone from behind Chisai. I respect it. A boy with a bird-like head stepped over to Chisai, clad in a similar black cloak, although his arms were closed inside and only his bird-like head came through the top. You could easily slip into the shadows in that costume, he said. Yes, Chisai agreed. Since I attack from a distance, it only made sense to attack unseen as well. Exactly my thinking, the boy said. He extended his arm out of his cloak. Fumikage Takoyami. Ryoshi Chisai, Chisai said, shaking Takoyami's hand. What's with the M? Ricky asked, noticing his belt. That's a secret, Chisai responded, grinning. But don't worry, you all will know its meaning when the time comes. Sir, one of the students called. This appears to be the same field used in the entrance exam. Will we once again be performing cityscape maneuvers? That was definitely Ida. And he was right, it was the same field. The 5 of them stepped up to the rest of the students, where All Might was standing on a stage. Funny, he could even make walking upstairs look powerful. Nope, you'll be moving on to step 2, All Might said proudly. Indoor anti-personnel battle training. The whole class simply waited for him to continue. Villain battles are most commonly seen outdoors, but statistically, the most heinous villains are more likely to appear indoors. Between confinement, house arrest, and black market deals, in this hero-filled society of ours, the cleverest of villains out there lurk indoors. Ricky was unsure about All Might's reasoning, but listened nonetheless. You'll now be split into villain and hero teams and face off in 2-on-2 indoor battles. Whatever happened to basic training? The frog girl, Asui, asked. Practical experience teaches you the basics, All Might clarified. The distinction here is that you won't be fighting disposable robots. What determines victory? Yayurazu asked. Can I just blast everyone away? Bakugo growled. Are you threatening to expel someone, like Mr. Aizawa did? Uraraka asked with uncertainty. How do we proceed to divide ourselves into teams? Ida asked, being the only one to raise his hand. Do we get to pick our teams? Azaria questioned. How much tech is in the building? Ricky inquired. How fabulous is my cape? Ayama asked. What's the scenario? Chisai asked. Hold on now, one at a time, All Might said. My quirk isn't super hearing, now listen up. The class quieted down and gave their attention back to All Might. Here's the deal. The villain teams will be hiding a nuclear weapon in the hideout, and the heroes have to go in and take care of it. Like a plot from Western comics, Izuku muttered. Not an uncommon situation, Chisai said. We could very well encounter this as a real threat. The heroes have a limited amount of time to either capture the villains or secure the weapon, All Might explained. The villains must either capture the heroes or protect the weapon until the time is up. He turned around and grabbed a cardboard box with a hole in the top. Your partners will be decided by drawing lots. Is that really the best way? Ida asked. Makes sense, Izuku started. because pros often have to team up with heroes from other agencies on the spot during emergencies. Right, Chaisai said. It forces us to plan around both our quirk and our teammates. I see, Ida realized. I apologize for getting ahead of myself. My mistake. It's fine. Let's just get to it. All Might replied, clearly wanting to start. The students came forward and drew all their lots, which All Might wrote down and announced. Team N is Ochako Uraraka and Izuku Midoriya, he said. Izuku's face went red, but he looked ready. Team B is Mizo Shoji and Shoto Todoroki. They found each other. Shoji had a deep blue mask over his face and 3 arms on each side. Todoroki looked as if his entire left side was encased in ice. Team C is Momo Yaoyorozu and Koguriki Mukitsu. Yaoyorozu had a huge ponytail and a rather revealing costume. Not one to peek, Ricky simply extended a friendly handshake, which she took. Ready, partner? Ricky asked jokingly, elbowing her arm softly. She just nodded. Team D is Tenya Ida and Katsuki Bakugo. The two just glanced at each other. Team E is Ejiro Kirishima and Hantasiro. They found each other and fist bumped. Team F is Ryoshi Chaisai and Fumikage Tokoyami. Chaisai and Tokoyami glanced at each other and nodded. All Might announced the rest of the teams and strode over to a table with 2 boxes labeled villain and hero. Moving on, first up are these. All Might pulled out a ball from each box. The hero ball said A, and the villain ball said D. Bakugo and Izuku stiffened up and Bakugo glared at Izuku. Azaria glared right back and Izuku unconsciously shrunk behind her. The villain team goes in first. The timer starts in 5 minutes, and then the hero team sneaks in, All Might explained. As for the rest of you, we'll catch it 0 N CCTV. All Might guided them all into the building, pointing Ida and Bakugo to the elevator to the top floor. The rest of them went with him down to the basement room, where they would watch the battle. All Might, Azaria started. Are you sure it's okay to put Izuku against Bakugo? They hate each other. Could I just stand in and stop them if it gets too intense? Not to worry, young Midoriya, he said. If anything gets out of hand, I'll stop the match. Now watch closely, everyone, and try to learn something. The timer started, and one of the monitors showed Izuku and Uraraka sneaking in through a window. They peeked around the corner and crept through the hallway, talking to each other, though only All Might could hear what they were saying. Azaria sighed and shook her head. Could I at least have an earpiece? All Might grabbed a black tub and handed her one. I don't see why not. He turned to the rest of the class. Would anyone else like an earpiece? Anyone? No? All right then. Suddenly, Bakugo flew out from an adjacent hallway, right into Izuku and Uraraka's path. Bakugo set off an explosion right in front of Izuku, who leapt backwards in a dodge. He looked all right, but half of his mask was gone. A sneak attack, Mineta gasped. That's low, Bakugo, Kirishima protested. Sneak attacks are so unmanly. Yet they are a valid strategy, All Might commented. He's doing exactly what a villain would do. True, but sneak attacks are only good the first couple times, Chaisai commented. Otherwise your opponent will come to expect them. That Midoriya kid sure can dodge, Ashido said, looking from the monitor to Kirishima. Ricky saw Azaria stiffen at Ashido's comment, but said nothing and watched the screen intently. Bakugo wore a sadistic expression on his face as he said something to Izuku and charged him with a right hook. It seemed as if Izuku was expecting this though, and he grabbed Bakugo's arm and used the forward momentum to fling him over his head and slam him onto the floor. Azaria pumped her fist in muted praise and relief before turning back to the screen. Izuku and Bakugo were yelling something at each other and Bakugo tapped a button on his costume's collar. He barked something at it and continued to stare down Izuku. Azaria's fists were still clenched, and she was shaking with rage. What are they saying? These fixed cameras don't have any sound, Kirishima observed. They're communicating with micro-transceivers. We give them to the battlers along with the building's blueprints. As well as this capture tape. All Might held up a small white roll of tape. Tying this around your opponent is sufficient proof of capture. So, they've only got 15 minutes. But the heroes don't know the location of the weapon, right? Ashido asked. Yes, All Might said. The hero teams are at a real disadvantage, huh? She observed. It's like Mr. Azawa told you. Say it with me. All Might shot his fists up in the air. Plus ultra. Ricky did the same, as did most of the other classmates. Even though I appreciate the school motto, it makes sense for the heroes to be at a disadvantage. They often are in situations like this, Chaisai said. That's exactly right, All Might agreed. Part of the evaluation for the hero teams is how they handle tough situations. Ah, monsieur, he's on the move, Ayama said. Ricky looked at the screen and saw Bakugo launching himself at Izuku. Izuku yelled something to Uraraka, who ran in the opposite direction and around a corner. Izuku ducked under one of Bakugo's punches and caught his leg with the capture tape. He's amazing, Sato remarked. Going toe-to-toe without using his quirk. Against the top scorer in the entrance exam, Suro added. Come on, Izu. Ricky heard Azaria say to herself, watching the screen intently. Izuku ditched the tape and slid under Bakugo, who blew up the wall where he had been mere seconds ago. He took a glance at Bakugo as if he was going to fight, but he turned away and ducked behind a corner, leaving Bakugo fuming. Azaria let out a breath. Thank goodness. That's the way, Midoriya, Ricky cheered. Strategize. He's really angry, Kaminari noted, gesturing to Bakugo. It's kinda scary. Yeah, but I guess it fits the exercise, Ricky said. Even though he fits the part, I don't see him thinking all that well when he's that angry, Chaisai commented. Anger clouds critical thinking. Not for Bakugo, Azaria replied worriedly. The screen they had been watching was now filled with Izuku hiding and Bakugo, stalking around the building trying to find him. Ricky looked to another monitor, which showed Ida standing by the weapon, tapping his foot impatiently. What Ida didn't notice was that Uraraka had just sneaked into the room and was hiding behind a pillar. Hey, check it out, Ricky said. Uraraka found the weapon. Ah, wonderful, All Might said. Now, class, watch closely. Take note of how she quietly sneaks around. As if on cue, she started giggling uncontrollably, alerting Ida to her presence. Oh, never mind then, All Might said. It seemed like Ida was monologuing, given that he simply stood in front of the weapon, waving his arms around. Oh, Sato said. Bakugo found Midoriya. Ricky looked to the other monitor, and sure enough, Bakugo was staring down Midoriya from the end of the hallway. Bakugo pointed his arm at Midoriya and kept talking. What's he doing? Suro asked. Why doesn't he just attack? Bakugo said something else, and All Might and Azaria stiffened. Bakugo pulled back a lever on his grenade gauntlets, exposing a pin in the side of it. What's that all about? Gyro asked. Azaria whipped around to All Might and didn't waste a second. You have to stop him now. He's going to kill my brother. Bakugo, All Might yelled into his microphone, acknowledging the girl's response. Stop it now. Are you trying to kill him? Bakugo growled something in response and pulled the pin. The entire monitor lit up, then went black. On another camera, facing the hallway from the side, an enormous explosion flew out towards the wall, blasting it apart. Midoriya was on the ground, his costume smoldering. All of the windows on the training building and the surrounding structures were completely shattered, and there was a smoking hole in the side of the building. I thought this was just practice, Kirishima yelled. He's actually trying to kill him, Ricky exclaimed to All Might. You need to cut this off now. This is getting too dangerous, Chaisai said urgently. On the other screen, Uraraka made a jump for the bomb by making herself float, while Ida was distracted by the explosion. It was a good thought, but Ida was too fast, and he grabbed the weapon and ran it to the other side of the room. Yaoyorozu and a few others took note, but most of the class was focused on the site of the explosion. "Sir, shouldn't you stop this?" Kirishima asked. "Bakugo's crazy. He's looking to kill." Izaria gritted her teeth and looked at All Might with pure determination. "If you don't stop him right now, I'll do it for you. And it won't be pretty." All Might looked back and shook his head. "You shouldn't go out there. It's not even your fight," Yaoyorozu pointed out. Izaria laughed without humor. "Not my fight? Are you joking? My brother is about to die, and you have the audacity to say that it's not my fight." "Young Izaria, calm down," All Might said sternly. He raised his microphone to his mouth. "Bakugo," All Might said. "Stop, right now. If you use that move again, I will end the match. Your team will lose. Not only are you endangering the life of your classmate, but if this were a real scenario, it's an awful strategy to use it indoors. You'd be destroying the stronghold you're supposed to be protecting. Hero or villain, it's a bad move that will result in a massive loss of points." Bakugo stopped and yelled out in anger. He brought his arm back down and burst up into the air towards Izuku. Izuku got ready to counterattack, but Bakugo changed course at the last second and blew himself up and over Izuku. He cancelled his backward momentum with a backwards blast and hit Izuku with a nasty explosion to his back. He used the first explosion to feint and change his attack, Todoroki observed. Then he followed up immediately with another one. "He doesn't strike me as a thinker," Yaoyorozu added. "But that strategy was fairly intricate." "Intricate, sure," Ricky said. "Also brutish and barbaric. Who could expect anything more from a villain?" Todoroki responded. Fair enough. I'm surprised he can think straight enough for moves like that, all while he's fuming," Chisai said. "He knows his way around a fight, and he knows his power like the back of his hand." Bakugo immediately followed up the attack with a quick and nasty right hook. He grabbed Izuku's arm and propelled himself around with his explosions, slamming Izuku down on the ground. Izaria gave a small whimper and covered her mouth, trying to compose herself. "This is just torture," Kirishima said. "He could have ended it with capture tape by now." "Not very heroic of him," Shoji muttered. "I thought Midoriya was good," Asui said. "But Bakugo's battle sense just can't be beat." Izuku scrambled to his feet and towards the wall away from Bakugo. Bakugo snarled something at him, and Midoriya shot right back. The exchange quickly devolved into a screaming match. Izaria shook her head and mumbled something, but it was too quiet for anyone other than All Might to hear. "Bakugo sure is confident," Gyro observed. "That's one way to put it," Ricky replied. The two opponents jumped at each other angrily. Bakugo's palm was glowing with heat, and Izuku's entire right arm was coursing with energy. Looked like he was finally using his quirk. "All Might, stop the match," Izaria exclaimed. "Sir, this looks bad," Kirishima warned. "Cut it off," Ricky called. "They'll take out the entire building," Chisai exclaimed. All Might said nothing and just stood there frozen. "Sir?" All Might finally snapped out of it. "Both of you, stop th." Izuku said something into his calm, and All Might gasped, his head whipping over to the other screen with Uraraka and Ida. Uraraka held onto a nearby pillar for dear life as Izuku punched upward at the last second, his attack creating such immense wind pressure that it made an enormous hole straight through the center of the building. "Whoa," Kaminari yelped, her pillar now detached from the floor. Uraraka used her quirk to swing it like a baseball bat, smacking several little bits of debris straight at Ida's face. The rest of the class watched in shock, still trying to catch up as she tossed the pillar away and made a huge leap for the weapon, landing on it with an exhausted grin. The All Might stammered. Izuku tumbled to the ground. The hero team. Bakugo looked down at Izuku mortified. The hero team wins. Izaria bolted straight out the door to help her brother. "Well then, perfect timing," All Might said. "I was going to have a few of you go help your classmates anyway." Ricky and Kirishima pushed past the other students and went out the door to help out. I'll get Ida and Uraraka, Ricky said. You go help Azaria with her brother and Bakugo. Got it. Kirishima gave him a thumbs up. Ricky unzipped his backpack and attached a few turbines to his legs and arms with his mind. He flew up to the top floor, where Ida was patting the back of a barfing Uraraka. You guys all right? Ricky asked, walking up to them. He carefully stepped around debris and the giant hole in the floor. Yes, we're fine, Ida replied. Thank you. Yeah. Uraraka, can you stand? Ricky asked. Why, yeah, she replied, hobbling to her feet. Great, Ricky responded. I need you both to grab my arms, and I'll get you guys down. He flew over to the gaping hole in the floor and stretched out his arms, which Ida and Uraraka grabbed. Hey, no barfing on the suit, Ricky added humorously. It's expensive. Uraraka chuckled softly as Ricky descended through the building, reaching the floor with the destroyed wall. All Might was there, his hands on Bakugo's shoulders, giving a lecture. Kirishima was with Azaria, and they were lifting Izuku onto a stretcher. Ah, young Mukitsu, All Might acknowledged. Thank you. Escort them to the camera room, if you'd please. Yes, sir, Ricky replied, flying the two exhausted students out of the giant explosion hole and down onto the ground. They walked down to the basement of the building, where the rest of the class was. All Might was right behind them with Kirishima and Bakugo, and the three remaining opponents were lined up at the front of the room. Time for me to announce the MVP, All Might boomed. And this round's MVP is Tenya Ida. Wow, Ida gasped. Not Ochako or Midoriya, Asui asked. Even though they won? That's a good question, All Might replied. Does anyone have the answer? The entire class remained silent, except for Yaoyorozu, who raised her hand. I do, mister. All Might, she said. Have at it, he said. It's because Ida was the most adaptable in the scenario, she said. From what I saw, Bakugo's every action was motivated by an obvious personal grudge against Midoriya. And as you said, using such large-scale attacks indoors is foolish. Midoriya's performance suffered from the same faults. Uraraka lost focus halfway through the exercise, and her final attack was far too hazardous. Such a move would be unthinkable if the nuclear weapon were real. But Ida formed an actual counter-strategy, and he envisioned what the actual struggle would be like. His only fault was that he reacted slowly at the very end. The rest of the class stayed silent, processing what Yaoyorozu had said. In conclusion, she continued, the hero team only won because they exploited the fact that this was a training exercise. All Might just looked at her, and the class was shocked at her perfect explanation. Hey, you nailed it, Ricky congratulated. My thoughts exactly, Chisai said. The only one who didn't make a glaring mistake was Ida. Thank you, she said stiffly. Why, yes, you got it, All Might said with a thumbs up. I would add a few things, such as, Ida could have relaxed a bit in the exercise. But otherwise you got it. We've got to start at the bottom and work up. If we don't earnestly cheer each other on, we'll never become top heroes, Yaoyorozu finished. Cheers, Ricky exclaimed. I'll fight to that.